Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you all. Those of you that have your camera on, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? All right. Sounds good. We will give folks a chance to come on in. Okay. Let's see. All right, as folks are filtering in, I'm just gonna give us a couple minutes. If you aren't already logged into the platform, you are welcome to do that. I'll remind everyone in just a moment as well for tier 2. And let me pull up my chat here. Okay. All right. Normally I would be a little quicker on the draw and have some music playing this morning, but I have just moved and I am still getting my office situation set up, and I have not been on top of it yet. But hopefully the next training we offer through Character Strong, I will have everything ready and going. Still like figuring out where my monitor is gonna go, that kind of thing. Okay. All right, welcome folks. Everyone who's just coming in, I'm just letting people in. We'll get started very soon. Okay, if you've started school this semester already, I hope it's off to a smooth start. If you're not there yet, hopefully you get a little bit more relaxation in, perhaps, or prep, whatever helps you feel good before the school year starts. It's coming up quick for a lot of folks. Heather, if you do you have your login information yet? Have you logged into the platform at all yet? Your school lead would have also helped to make sure that your account is linked. You have, okay, so just that, just logging in. And let me see if I can even, let me see if I can, hold on, my account is different, but let me log out. And then it's just like logging in with your whatever username and email, username or email you would have set up. Sorry, mine's making me re-go. There we go. And then it's going to look like this. Once you're, well, you may or may not have all the tiers, but depending on which tiers you have, you'll at least see tier 2. Awesome. Okay, great. All right. Well, some folks might still be filtering in a little bit. I am going to go ahead and get started. And then as folks are joining, I'll have another kind of touch point too to get us logged in and get us going with tier 2 today. So welcome folks to the tier 2 deep dive. And let me just double check that my recording settings are good to go. Where are we here? Yes, we are good to go. Okay, so this will be recorded because we'll post these to the website as well. So worst case scenario, you could always go back and just rewatch. You can fast forward to whatever, point, if there's something you want to review, or if you came in later and want to go back and kind of see the beginning, you can definitely do that. We will post these for you. So welcome. All right. So for everyone who has joined, we are going to get started with one of our favorite things to do, which is a connection game. This one is called Powerline because the idea is that if you were to do this with students in like a small group, for example, like a tier 2 small group, you could have everybody participate where you introduce some movement, but we can do this virtually too. So for Powerline, the idea is that if you had like a line that runs across the room, in this case, we're just going to use the numbers, but you would ask folks to arrange themselves like kind of middle of the room is in that 5-6 range. All the way to one side of the room means that you love it. All the way to the other side of the room means you loathe it. Oh, I didn't mean to raise my hand. Just kidding. Um, and the idea is that you choose wherever whichever space fits how you feel about the thing. So in this case, we are talking about hot weather. So I'm going to ask, instead of arranging ourselves within, the room, obviously, that we just put into the chat what our number is. So how do you feel about hot weather? If you go closer to 10, that means you love it. If you're closer to the 1, that means you loathe it. I bet people feel, yeah, we've got some strong numbers right now. I'm in Southern California and we are having quite the heat wave. So I know people are feeling very strongly about this right now. All right, we've even got some tens, some nines, and some lower numbers for sure. Twos. Let's see, I'm looking for a one. Do I see a one yet? No. Okay, Hannah, you have a qualifier here that you will love it, but only if you're at like a lake or river or ocean. So you've got to have the water nearby. I feel you on that for sure. Nice. Most interesting. We have quite a few people who really love it. Oh, there we go. Sam, you're one. Sam's like, nope. Sam, I'm curious, does it make a difference if it's like dry hot weather or humid hot weather? Feel free to unmute or you can type in the chat. Does that make a difference for your one? Not at all. You're like, nope, give me Scandinavia or Alaska or Canada or what have you. I'm curious, Sam, where are you coming in from? Where are you located? Despise dry and humid, Crystal. We've got folks from all over. Northern Kentucky. Okay, I'm from Indiana originally, so I get you with that. Yep, the Midwest humidity. It's real. It's real, real. The only place I felt stronger humidity than in the Midwest is when I lived in Charleston, South Carolina. Good Lord. Beautiful place, but man, this time of year is something else. So, okay, I get you. All right. Well, I'm coming to you all, like I said, from Los Angeles area, and it has been over 100 here lately, and people are melting. So, and it is technically a drier heat here, but I don't know. There's a point where I don't know if that matters. So, all right. Okay. Another question for you all for the chat. What do you want to get out of our time together today? Just a couple words, kind of summarize. What are you hoping for in terms of, goals, what we'll be covering? feel free to just add that into chat. We still have some folks joining, so it'll give us a little more time too. And that way I can make sure to adjust. Some ideas to support Tier 2 students, how to access the materials, the platform. We've got our brand new platform that is continuing to roll out with updates. Yes, excellent. We've got a lot of folks that are new to Character Strong Tier 2. Excellent. Looking for some direction. Okay, Brenna, you were using the old system. Looking forward to the new one. Yes. It's like driving in a new car lately. It's been pretty cool. All right. Some strategies for attendance, more collaborative, team-focused approach. Nice, Tabitha. Awesome. Okay, how do we do Yep, tier 2 supports in classrooms. Excellent. Okay, great. Okay, Laura, you guys are in the second year of implementing. Okay, well, it's going to be as if you've kind of bought a new car, like an upgraded version, new, features, and has that new car smell. So that should be fun. We really, one thing I can assure everyone with respect to just the new tier 2 and all of the different new features and how things have been updated, is that that was done really with feedback from people like you all, our customers, folks that are have, given of their time to either let us know through the platform, while they're using it, or even through things like focus groups. We did a pretty cool thing at our national conference where we put together what we call an Insights Lab, where we were able to sort of showcase like one of the new small group lessons and get some feedback from folks directly live and in person, right then and there too. So we've really tried to be responsive to, the information that you all have provided and make improvements based on that. So it wasn't just like, well, we think, that this area or this particular format is an improvement. We really based it on our customers' info. So hopefully it feels that way. And so far we've gotten some really good feedback. So we'll see how y'all feel about it at the end of our time together today. All right. So what you need to know about our time today. We are going to be together for 3 hours. We will, like I mentioned, this is being recorded. The purpose for that is so that we can upload this to our, really it's the Training and Resources Hub. I should probably change the language on that. But it's the Training and Resources Hub so that there is a place for you to go back and review as needed or, share with others or what have you. We will utilize the chat. You can use the raising hand feature, and we're also going to use Zoom Annotate. Some of you may have used that before, possibly not everyone. We'll get a second here in just a minute to be able to try that out. Make sure everybody feels comfortable with that. It's just kind of a fun way to add some interactivity into Zoom, especially since we are, virtual and which is okay. But I think sometimes compared to in person, there's, a little bit of interactivity that suffers sometimes. So it's just kind of a fun way to add something else into it, and to get your, feedback and thoughts in different areas. So we'll give that a go. If you want to take just a second to look for it, it should be on the top of your Zoom like window or frame. You might see where it says Character Strong Tier 2, Tier 3 screen. And then if you click on the three dots, as I'm sure we're all quite familiar at this point, the three dots is like the key to unlocking everything. And then annotate. And then you can select, there will be like a menu that comes up that allows you to select the like stamp, which is a check mark, or there's a heart or a star. There's like a couple different shapes that you can choose from. Oh, Heather's got it. I see you, Heather. Nice. Awesome. Well, we got a couple in there. Okay, great. We're getting them. Awesome sauce. Okay, it's working. All right, so then in just a little bit, we are going to have the chance to actually kind of add our stamps on like a slide activity, basically. And what I'll be able to do on my end, as folks are like adding in their stuff, I can like clear the slide if we want like a clean slate to answer another question. Or if I'm on here and let's say I put an X, I didn't actually want an X. Oh, that looks so negative. I'm going to put a star instead. I want to clear mine. I'm actually just going to clear my drawing so my X goes away. And then just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to clear everybody's on the slide and we'll do it that way. So we'll be able to get a chance to practice this again here in just a second. All right. Oop, didn't mean to annotate that. Okay, hold on here. There we go. All right. So, we will, in addition to annotation, we will be able to get into the platform. So again, a way that you can, oh, you don't have the, Hannah, I'm sorry, I just saw your comment. You don't have the three dots. Okay, so, Hannah, or, sorry, Heather, if you can try to find, do you see where at the top it says Character Strong Tier 2, Tier 3 screen? Oh, yours is under View Options. Oh, that's interesting. It may depend on the version of Zoom that you have. Does that help you out, Hannah? Either the options, view options, or clicking on my screen, the character. And yours, oh, okay, Sandra, yours is at the bottom left. Well, it sounds like it's all over the place depending on which Zoom version you have. And on iPad. It's in the pencil. Oh, I learned something new there. Okay. Okay, so you're good, Hannah? So I'm gonna make sure everybody feels okay about it. Okay, all right, no problem. And yours is the pencil. Okay, so let's see. It sounds like we've got some options of looking for a pencil if you've got it. Looking for my screen like tab kind of. It's like a button. Sometimes it shows up at the top left. I know that when Zoom changed their settings and stuff, the first time this happened, I had a hard time actually finding another person's screen at first. For some reason, it didn't like stand out. But it would say Character Strong Tier 2, Tier 3 screen. So that may be an option. Or the view options is another one. And you've got found the pencil. Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. All right. So other things that you can do. Now I'm going to demonstrate everything, so don't feel like you have to. But I'm going to demonstrate going into the platform, but you are more than welcome to do that. If you'd like to, you can log in, you can kind of just like follow along and do as I do. As once we kind of go through, we will have these like stop points for exploring. But again, I will also demonstrate it. And, this is recorded again. So you don't have to necessarily get in there if it's distracting or you want to just kind of follow along with like the slides and what's happening. That's perfectly fine. It's totally up to you. But we will have some periods of time where we get to do a little exploration. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself as well. My name is Cameo Stanek. I'm our Senior Director of Behavioral Health Implementation and Innovation here at Character Strong. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist by training. I have worked in and with schools my entire career and all over the place. I've literally moved back and forth across both oceans. I've worked in schools in Great Britain. I've lived and worked in schools in Hawaii. I didn't live in the school, but I lived in Hawaii and I worked in schools. And in Montana, in South Carolina, in the Midwest, in Oklahoma, I've been all over the place and have been in schools, big, small, rural, urban, charter schools, private schools, you name it. So I am hopeful that my experience there will be helpful as we think about how each of you implements tier two within your school or within your district. And I've kind of seen it done in different kinds of ways. And what we know and sort of what we've gathered over the years is that there are certain components of implementing tier two that not only represent what's in that evidence base, like what the research tells us is most effective in terms of implementing tier two, but also ways that you can think about sort of tailoring it to your own system and what makes sense. And you'll hear me say this more than once today, that if you have something that's working for you, whether that's a screener or piece, certain data pieces that you utilize, what we talk about today, you do not have to necessarily like drop that and use what Character Strong is using. We provide a lot of tools in order for schools to utilize them if they would like. Some schools will de-implement what they have and implement what we've got, but that isn't the expectation. We really just want to provide to you, what are sort of best practices for tier two implementation and some tools to make that work. And then, of course, what sort of lives in our platform as well. The idea that we're continually going for, and certainly with our new tier two, this is increasing. Uh, the ability to do this is really increasing, is to have sort of everything live in one system. Because I know it's really tough for schools. This happens all the time, that you have like multiple systems that you're trying to navigate. And sometimes that's fine. And there's components that you really want to keep of certain systems. But it also can be a little chaotic sometimes. It can be a lot to navigate. So we're trying more and more to kind of implement in one area as best we can so that it's just there and ultimately becomes like a one-stop shop kind of place, including across tiers as well. So we're talking tier two today, but we really can't talk about a singular tier without also thinking about the other ones. So we will speak to that, a little bit as well, especially in terms of some of the improvements that we have. Okay, so objectives for today, we will for sure go over the CST Tier 2 process, each of the steps. We'll talk about the new and improved small group skill building curricula. What are those core components? What's the science behind it? Who can really benefit from the curriculum? We will talk about our performance-based interventions as well and resources around that. It's also where our attendance supports live. So I know somebody mentioned that piece in particular, so you'll get to see that today too. And today, our hope is that you'll leave with some skills to use the new Character Strong Tier 2 platform to guide that process as you are delivering Tier 2. All right, so a lot of you have gotten some practice in this. Let's try it one more time. With the annotate function, put on your little stamp somewhere along that line. How are you feeling about implementing CST2 right now? Granted, this is before the deep dive. We recognize this. So somewhere on that line, kind of find where you're at. We'll see where we land. And for folks who joined a little bit late, what you're looking for the annotate feature, if you've never used this in Zoom, it's either in the three dots, it's called annotate, or you might need to click on, usually in the top left, where it says Character Strong Tier 2, Tier 3 screen. Might need to click on that to find annotate, or the pencil. Some folks have found the pencil is their annotate button, or annotate feature. And then you just want to select a stamp. It's the easiest way to do that. Brittany put her name. She is like putting her stamp on this thing with her name. That's totally fine. You can do it by text as well. The stamp is easier because it's just one button, but all good. Okay, well, we actually have, okay, I'd say on average, we're looking at more people kind of towards the like, I'm feeling pretty good end, but not by much. There's quite a few people still that are in this area of like, I don't know where I'm at yet, not sure what to do yet, just learning, especially with the new system. Even if you had used our system previously or last year, there's a lot of new features that are happening. So Okay. So we've got a mixed crowd here, but I would say there's a little bit heavier um, stamping happening kind of more towards the positive end. That may also just reflect that folks are feeling energetic. It's the beginning of the school year, or maybe you haven't started school, so your energy is at its peak. So, which is all good. Okay, well, our hope is that we take some of these stamps down here, especially, and that we kind of move the needle on those. All right, so kind of think about now, remember, reflect where you stamped yourself, and we will see how we do for the rest of our time today. Okay, all right, so let's keep rolling. Okay, so the structure for what we will discuss today is we're going to talk a bit about the why, like why is tier two needed, particularly a solution that's like this. What are those core components of character strong tier two? What are the concepts? What's sort of the knowledge base there? And then the how. And that gets us into the sort of modeling of how we use the platform and doing a little bit of exploration there. Okay, so let's start with the why. This is helpful in terms of centering ourselves and kind of grounding ourselves around, why is it that we're looking into this? Why is it so important ultimately that we do have a high quality, well-functioning, high fidelity tier two system? And I kind of like to start this by first asking the question, do you believe in intervention, early intervention? Which is mostly a rhetorical question. Chances are you do because you're here, right? Um, and ultimately, when it comes to tier two, if you believe in early intervention, that's really what tier two is all about. Because if you look at our pyramid, right, I'm sure you all have seen this 1,000 times in different ways. But the idea of again, high functioning, high quality, multi-tiered system of support is that we've got everybody in that tier one, right? Everybody gets access to these universal supports. No one is excluded from that. And there are some students, yes, there's that prevention element, Jenny, excellent. So there's some students that just can't quite be maintained at that tier one level alone. They need a little bit of extra support. And there's sort of, when we think about tier two, which out of all the tiers, frankly, and all the different schools that I've been in, and if you all have been in different schools as well, you might have seen this too. I would say that tier two is the one that schools and districts tend to struggle the most with. Like a lot of schools can get really good at those universal supports, having, expectations, behavioral expectations, being really clear about it, having, really high quality restorative practices, like all kinds of good stuff that's happening at tier one. And the kids that are in need of that tier three level support, although sometimes it's overloaded if tier two is sort of missing or not fully flushed out. But again, there's a lot of kids at tier three. If nothing else, they often make themselves known to us, right? Like maybe not everybody, but a lot of kids that are in need of that tier three support, they kind of make themselves known. So being able to identify kids that are in need of that tier three support, again, not so much a struggle a lot of the time. But tier two, which is really the sum students, right? It's a smaller group than tier one. It's a bigger group than tier three, but trying to find that sort of sweet spot for the middle is often the biggest struggle. And it really is in part because it is about early intervention. It is not sort of the wait to fail model, right? It is about getting in there when we notice as early as possible that a student is struggling and before they are needing that tier three more intensive level of support, just as Jenny mentioned. So it's a little bit of both and it's early intervention and it's prevention. And that's tough. That's a tall order and can be really hard to kind of get right. So that's mostly what I just said, that it is early intervention. It is also prevention of students going into tier three. It's also a team sport. Okay, so tier two is a team-based problem-solving process that involves using data to make decisions. It is about increasing precision on how we support students. So taking what's done at tier one and really increasing and tailoring the precision for a particular student or set of students. And when we think about like percentages and how much do we mean when we say some, right? We're really talking in the once it's functioning, again, it may take some time to get there, but we're talking about in the like 10 to 15% range for students who are in need of tier two supports in addition to tier one. Okay, so that's kind of that's a percentage, and how that sort of ties into capacity, right, is pretty important. That's what we're shooting for. You may not be there yet, but that's ultimately what we're shooting for. So just kind of keeping that in mind as you're thinking about, where your district or your building is at for identification for tier two. This is our tier two formula. We always like to kind of go over this. So we're talking about some students, that's really the who are getting that more targeted support compared to tier one. That's the what, and that's being done through a team-driven problem-solving process, which is the how. You put those things together, you've got tier two. Okay. All right, another way to kind of think about that layered support as far as what are the tier two supports. Um, we can think about it in terms of like our ice cream metaphor, right? Where at the base there at tier one, we've got um, everybody gets vanilla ice cream, let's say. Okay, that's like our base, or some ice cream. Doesn't have to be vanilla. Vanilla can be really boring. But like some ice cream that's really at the base, that kind of goes with everything, right? That's really what we think about in terms of tier one. And then some students, whether that's an individual, these can be done individually or more group based. Some students need a little bit of extra topping, right? In order to kind of make this whole ice cream sundae sort of work for them. So some students need a little bit extra. But that little bit extra also isn't requiring necessarily we're thinking low impact, sorry, low burden, high impact kinds of interventions and supports. We're talking about interventions at tier two that are not requiring like specialty training or credentials. We've tried really hard with our content to make it very accessible for the adults so that the adults don't necessarily need, a bunch of, you don't have to have like a background in mental health, for example, to be able to deliver tier two supports effectively. And then the other piece being that we're identifying really what the root cause is for those somewhat more intensive needs, the needs that are, not able to be kind of maintained and supported solely at a tier one level. And being able to kind of go back to and identify like what's behind this, because there's a lot of behavior that we might see that makes us think, okay, this is a student that's sort of screening positively for needing tier two supports, but behavior on the surface versus what is the root cause, that root cause can be pretty different. So we do need to have some kind of screening or, tools in place to be able to make some hypotheses about what that root cause is. Because once we know the underlying reason for why that need exists, then we can match the student to the correct intervention. And that's pretty critical, because if we are off target with our, supports, then we're not going to see much change at the end of the day, in those, in the behavior that we're observing ultimately. All right. Um, there is a tool that we also have available to you, just something that your team can utilize, particularly if you're newer to tier two. It allows you to, we call it this tier two knowledge check. It allows you to kind of self-assess, like where your knowledge is around our tier two solution or around the concepts that are included within tier two and the components that are part of that. I'm going to just go into our platform really quickly just to kind of show you a quick way of finding that knowledge check. It's something that you can use. You can even download it, print it out. You can use it with your teams, just as a way to sort of self-assess, like at baseline, like where are we at in terms of knowledge here? So I'm going to, okay, let me go in here. Just make sure, thumbs up. Can you see my platform? I'm like off the slides. Okay, great. And I have given myself a thumbs up. Let me lower my hand here, or lower my thumbs up. Where is it? Why isn't it showing? Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So within the platform, we will get back into all of this in just a moment, but I've just gone into tier 2. I've gone into the Training and Resources Hub. I'm going to go straight to the resource library, and I'm just going to do a Control F because we have a lot of stuff in here. I'm just going to do a Control F, if I can spell right. There we go. And in here, it's going to pull this up, CST2 knowledge check. I'm just going to click on that and it'll pull up that document. It's pretty brief. It's really, and it's just a yes, no kind of screener. You know, again, where are we at? Where's our team at? Where's our folks who are, you know, integrated into doing this tier 2 problem solving with me? What do we need to kind of beef up? Where are we at a baseline? So just as a resource for you to know about, I just wanted you all to see where that would be located if you wanted to use that. Oh, now I'm also annotating. There we go. All right. So that can be a good place to start. So another piece in terms of just getting started, getting running, is for your team to kind of begin the process by going through what we have set up and structured for you to be able to start, particularly thinking about readiness for tier 2. We have quite a, you know, as I mentioned, we have quite a lot of resources. We are continually adding to those resources, particularly because a lot of what we had, if you were a previous tier 2 user, what we had previously, referencing kind of the old platform and the way that it was structured, we have wiped a lot of those resources because they're just not as relevant anymore. And so what we're doing now is kind of starting not entirely fresh, but we have some videos we've been able to maintain. We're kind of consistently adding more, including today's recording, for example, will go up there. But what I recommend that you do at minimum is to watch the Getting Started video and to consider who are going to be those sort of resident experts that will also be the ones to participate in things like this, in the professional learning opportunities relevant to tier 2, who's going to be part of the team that knows the curriculum or that is part of delivering those performance-based supports, knowing how to train others, that kind of thing. So there's, you know, a lot of resources we have to sort of get teams started and to get your wheels turning around that. And we'll continue to go back into the platform to take a look at those resources as well. Just to point out a couple pieces here. With respect to this whole school readiness, again, I was on the Training and Resources Hub. Let me get back here, show you this guy under your tier 2 toggle, Training and Resources Hub. This page is reflected here on this slide. This whole school readiness, if you click into that, explore, there's a video that you can watch about whole school readiness relevant to tier 2. There's a whole slide deck that you can download as well. So if you're the person that's going to be kind of responsible for training up your team members, we've got some resources in there available for you. And there's a readiness overview document. We've got a clarity checklist, which is about like shared clarity amongst your team members. Again, another way to just sort of check in on where we at baseline as we are getting started. So those are just some examples of resources available to you. Okay, we'll come back to that as we spend time together today. All right, so we do want to talk a little bit about what are some of the core concepts that are relevant for tier 2, what knowledge is kind of embedded within that, and then again, the how. So shifting gears a little bit into like, what really makes this up? What are some of the resources? And then we'll continue to explore within the platform as well. Okay. All right. So this is what you see on here, this readiness through step 5, this is our CST2 process. And one thing that I just want to point out, and this is particularly true if you are already a tier 2 user, is that everything that we do within tier 2, we want to think about kind of finding ourselves somewhere along this line in this process. Okay. And we used to have kind of a lot of tools that sort of lived externally. I mean, within the platform, but also things that had to be downloaded and what have you that were sort of separate in a way from this process. They tapped into the process, but it sort of took some extra steps to get there. And what we've done with our new and improved tier 2 platform is that more of those steps are just embedded within the platform itself. So some of these, if you think about each of these steps, is really about a decision point where there's decisions that are being made within a team, often where we are looking at data of some kind to make those decisions. More and more, that decision-making process, you're going to be prompted for it in the platform itself, or there's going to be some kind of like a way that the platform sort of guides you through some of that decision making. So again, those of you that have used it before, used tier 2 before, you'll notice a difference there where it's just sort of baked in. And there's a little bit less that is external or kind of lives outside along the way. So I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly, but just want to point out that really even before we get into the detecting and triaging of students, we do have to spend a little bit of time thinking about readiness. And you all are going to be at all, as we saw in our like annotation line, right? In terms of how are you feeling about tier 2? That is tapping into readiness. Where are you at? Where's your school at? Where's your team at? Are you the like, here is like, I am the tier 2. I'm the tier 2 person. It's just me. I'm here. I'm gonna like carry the flag for everybody. Um, I want to say it now. I'll say it again later. Tier 2 is a process, not a person. So if that's where you're at, it may be that your first step in readiness is, in fact, figuring out who are going to be your people, who's your team, right? Because this cannot be carried alone. We're talking about 10 to 15% of students in a building. It's too many for one person. Plus, every step along this process is reliant on other people as well. So if you're here as like the tier 2 flag flyer, just know that your first step when you go back to work later today or next week or whenever you're kind of starting back in full, your first step is about recruitment, because it can't just be you. It's too much for one person. We know that about up to 80% of implementation efforts do fail because of lack of readiness to implement. So some of the tools that we have available, like the knowledge check, like the rubrics, we really love our rubrics, but it's because they're an easy way to kind of measure where are we starting and then how far have we come along all the core components that are relevant to implementing whichever tier, in fact, but any kind of multi-tiered system of supports. Um, because of this issue, that readiness component is super duper important. And there are phases along an implementation process. This is not an overnight thing. When we're talking about, scaling up tier 1 into tier 2, for example, or beefing up our tier 2, even if we technically have tier 3 and tier 1, or, whatever it might be, that's a culture change for schools. So we want to be sure that we don't sort of underestimate that and recognize that implementation is a process, it's a phase process where we move from pre-implementation. We're really getting the adults and the systems ready and prepared to be able to start engaging in the process. And then as we move into that active implementation, at the end of the day, where we're like adopting practices and continuing doing the sustainment piece as well, we're working on improving our fidelity along the way. All of that is a culture shift, and all of it takes time. At minimum, what we know from the science on implementation is that larger scale implementation efforts, which is things like adopting a tier 2 system of support, for example, to have full, high fidelity, moved into like a out of active implementation into a sustainment phase, we're talking about years, not days or months, right? It can take a long time. So I have some recommendations for you all. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but just some ideas to make this more feasible. And the main gist is to not kind of try to do everything all at once. There are ways that you can onboard tier two in a phased way. There are some quick wins you can get into early on as you start to continue to build your capacity and build up your teams. So what we're aiming for when we talk about whole school readiness is really these pieces that everyone is, in the same boat, thinking about outcomes, right? That means we have to have shared clarity around what outcomes are we even looking for? How are those things defined, right? We all have to be using the same definition here, so we got to be in the same boat. Everyone's using the same process and practices, right? So we're all using the same kind of oars, the same paddles, and everybody's actually going in the same direction as well. And that's about the commitment piece. So same boat, same paddles, same direction. That is shared clarity. That's ultimately what we're shooting for. And sometimes we have to do some work around that first to be able to really think about onboarding more of the intervention component in a way that will be meaningful so that we can actually see change ultimately. Again, there's some resources for you that are specifically around that shared clarity and commitment. We've got that in that whole school readiness section of the Training and Resources Hub. There's slides, there's resources, there's videos. You can download those. You can go over them with your team. In team meetings is a great time to consider doing that. If you have an existing tier two team, these are great resources. Even if you are not new to CST2 or just to tier two in general, if you all have been doing it, but maybe with a different system, I would recommend still taking a look and maybe at least like watching one of the videos together with your team at the start of the school year. It's just a good refresher. And that readiness component is just so important that it can be helpful to, if nothing else, just to kind of like remind everybody, why we're here. And maybe you have newer staff that are part of your team as well. It can be a way to kind of get everybody up to speed. So just a recommendation there to use those resources available to you. Okay, let's try it again. I've seen a lot of folks annotating accidentally. It's easy to do once you turn annotate on. If you click the slides, it's like ding, ding. Let's do it intentionally now. So I'm going to ask you, where are you at? So if we look at effective teaming is necessary to drive successful tier two, where is your school at? Click on whichever like color blob with your annotate stamp. Do you have a full tier two team? Do you have somewhat of a tier two team? No tier two team yet. You are the tier two team. That would be the no tier two team. Where are folks at with their stamps? Give everybody a second. If you're having trouble finding your stamp, let me know. There's a few different ways depending on your version of Zoom. We've got a lot of group support in our chat here around this. Okay. It's pretty cool to see a lot of the folks that have the full tier two team. That's awesome. We've got, I would say, probably more people in the somewhat. We've got some folks who are like, nope, not there yet. If you, just a quick kind of share out, if you put your stamp on the full tier two team, can you either unmute or put into the chat, were you using Character Strong like last year as part of your full tier two team or something different? Somebody who'd be willing to unmute or type into the chat about that. Just curious where the full team members are at.
Mind unmuting. I'm in a coffee shop because they're cleaning my classroom currently right now. But yeah, this will be our second year using tier two.
Okay.
I'm actually a resource teacher and I do sixth grade social skills. And we ended up buying tier two and tier three because we realized when going through and learning last year that most of my students, my sixth graders, were tier two, whereas our BI teacher had a lot of the tier three kids.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting because we got to go between the two tiers because there's just a flow and a flexibility, um,
Yes.
fluidity. Like special education kids don't have to be, even if they have a social behavior goal, don't have to be in the tier three program if their needs are being met in the tier two. Because our fluidity in our program shows that the more intensive needs are doing those tier three pathways. Whereas
Mhm.
the kids that need smaller needs, or maybe they even need more of that just help in the classroom, those kids are the tier two kids that are with me, or they're in inclusion with their their peers, and they are getting stuff from our counselor or our tier two interventionist. And so our hope this year is to implement more of the trackers because we have a tracker system for our school, but we want more fluidity in the trackers to be succinct from tier two to tier three. So
Mhm.
we're really excited for it. Like, even though it's only our second year, we have our BI teacher, me, our tier two interventionist, our counselor, and then I brought in one of our sixth grade teachers and a parent this year. So,
Ooh, and a parent. Tell us your recruitment
yeah.
strategy. Did you get a parent to participate? That's great.
It's I just got really lucky because I had the sister last year, my first year in this district.
Uh-huh.
And so I talked with the parent over the summer because we just happened to be friends outside of school. And I asked her, I was like, I would love to share a couple of things and some resources and share some parent things that because we're trying to send home more of the parent information this year,
Mm-hmm.
and see how we can adjust them to be more parent friendly for our kids and our um, community. So
It's great. Yeah, and that's such a great place to start. There's a couple of things you mentioned that are, I think for folks, especially those that are in the, we don't have a tier two team yet, like we're just getting started. A couple things you mentioned, which is one is sort of aspirational, and I think one is feasible more quickly. The aspirational piece is that when we've got that fully functioning multi-tiered system, you mentioned fluidity and flexibility. That is the goal, to have students be able to move up and down between tiers, not just up, right? But be able to move down, to move up, to move down, have some fluidity in between the tiers. That is the goal, actually, because that means that our system is nimble enough that we can identify when some students need some extra support, but it's like, I like to say that social skills group is not a life sentence, right? Just because you go into social skills group at the beginning of the school year does not mean you have to stay there the whole year, right? Or anything really, any kind of intervention that we are putting into place for students. The idea is that they're coming out of that extra because it's extra. Like that takes time, energy, capacity from the adults, right? And there's so many kids that need different kinds of interventions. There's only so many adults that can provide it. So we have to constantly be coming back to our capacity rate, which is really about the base rate of the number of students that need it and our capacity to provide it. Ultimately, the adults there that can provide it. We have to be consistently reevaluating that. And when students can move with some fluidity, there's decision rules. We'll talk about that in a moment, but there's decision rules around how we move between the tiers. That is the goal. And it's a continuous quality improvement process, as I'm sure you've seen, Jenny, as well. But to have some of that fluidity, it's a great aspirational goal for your systems, but it takes time to get there. The other piece that I would say, based on what you had mentioned too about the parent participation, a fully functioning, tier two team ideally does have that parent participation and role on there. And it's also perfectly okay to sort of cherry pick where you can, right? Having a parent who is willing and able to participate may not be the parent of the student that is the largest challenge, for your tier two team. And really what you like is that parent, that set of parents to participate. But we've got to start somewhere. And so to just get to the point of having a parent role as part of a regular meeting tier two team, That's awesome. You can start, wherever you can get in that, just kind of get in on the ground level and then you sort of work your way up. That's a really, I think, pretty feasible goal for lots of folks to just kind of start where you can and work your way up. And if you've got a parent that is willing and able, bring them in.
We
They still
had
have
no
that great
team last year.
perspective.
We had no team last year. It was literally
Oh, my
we were
goodness.
we actually didn't even start the year with Character Strong. We had no curriculum to start the year. We got it about
Wow.
November, and we just randomly would figure out who could do what. And
Awesome.
so we came
Yeah.
a really long way. We've had to put in a lot of hours, but it's
Yeah.
so possible, like starting from zero. Like if I can start in November,
Yeah.
praise the Lord, we get to start now.
Yeah, you'll be in a different position this year for sure, like being able to start the school year at least with a team in place. So you did a lot with a little bit of time. That's great. Nice job. Okay, thanks for sharing. Okay, so awesome. Oh wait, let me go back and clear our annotations. Well done, everyone. Okay, with our advanced Zoom features here. Okay, so let's talk more than about teams. So again, like as you've heard, there's these different roles that we're sort of shooting for. This resource is also provided to you through our Tier 2 platform resources. What it highlights is the different areas of expertise that are recommended on a Tier 2 team. And again, as we've heard, the expectation is not that you have all of these roles identified right away, but really that you just think about, okay, if we do have a tier, if you selected that, we have at least somewhat of a team, take a look at this resource and consider, are there any gaps in terms of roles or areas of expertise? You can have folks hold more than one area. So it's not to say that like expertise means like only one person has that information. As Jenny mentioned, like we might just kind of pull in people like who can do what, what's your area of strength? Again, the point here is not that we have like all, folks with graduate degrees that are specific to certain areas. That's not at all the purpose. But really like who is willing and available and able to do these different roles. But you may have one person, if you have a school psychologist, for example, they might be the social emotional behavioral health expert and the data expert, for example. Or you might have somebody that data is just their thing. Like they don't have all these other kind of areas of training, but that's something they love. They get it. They're into being able to interpret the data for the team and support the team. Cool. Bring that person in. But you can have multiple people, multiple roles, but it can't be one person in all roles. That's where tier 2 is just not going to work. It's going to break down because it's just not enough. It's going to be too much burden for one person. And at the same time, if that's where you're starting, like you're the person that's kind of bringing it in, consider on here, what are a couple different areas you can do? Start very low and go slow and try to continually recruit to bring people onto your team. And we've got some resources in there, just kind of built in to help determine then what's possible. How do you as a team identify like a vision and a purpose? We even have some sample agendas and things like that as well. Okay. Um, so there's also the effective teaming inventory. Again, this is a measure. So something that can allow you to have, if you've got that tier 2 team or you have somewhat of a team, for example, or you're building your team, something you can do early on in the year is to take this inventory, use this resource so that you can see where you're at a baseline or at a baseline at least at the beginning of the year, and then reevaluate every so often to see have we moved the needle? How are things going ultimately? Um, some more to-dos just to consider is just making sure that you've got the right people on your team, assigning those roles and responsibilities so everyone has that clear plan for what their expectations are based on their role. Something we say a lot at Character Strong is right people, right seats. And so, again, like it might be that we've got the right people, but they're in the wrong seat in terms of what their responsibility is, or vice versa. So thinking about who is available, who's on your team, what their strengths are, it's totally okay to kind of go with people's strengths, right? Go with where they feel comfortable, come together to build that vision and purpose, and then really get into the logistics. So doing things like calendaring out your meetings. We've got some recommendations about, for example, like meeting at least twice a month, preferably once a week, but it's all going to depend on your capacity. Using a structured meeting agenda so that we're making sure that we're hitting all the main components that we need to hit. We're taking time to embed that 5-step tier 2 process into our agenda so that we're looking at students who are needing to get identified for tier 2 in that detect step 1, as well as considering, okay, who's ready to be maybe stepped back out of tier 2, back into tier 1, or who maybe needs to go into like more of a tier 3 level of support. The last step, the 5th step of tier 2, is review and decide. That's what it's all about. Do we stay the course with the student? Do we step them down into a less intensive level of support? Do we need to consider stepping them up into a more intensive level of support? Where are we at with that? So all those steps, having them really, our agenda really mirroring the steps. Um, and you can assess your functioning as a team as far as that's concerned. Okay. Um, let me talk about this for about 5 to 10 more minutes, and then we're going to take a little stretch break as well. Okay, so all of what we just covered is really focusing on readiness. We're going to now kind of move along our process into talking through a bit about step 1, which is the detect and triage process, right? This time point, which again, like I said, kind of every step on the process for tier 2 is really about making decisions ultimately. That's what it comes down to. So for the detect and triage, when we're talking about detection, we're saying proactively detect students to be able to activate early, timely intervention as close to the time of when a student needs that extra social, emotional, or behavioral support, right? So that's the early intervention. We're trying to get it as close to when that need arises. So we're getting away from like the wait to fail kind of model. That, again, if you've seen this happen within your school, you are not alone. It happens a lot for a lot of different reasons. But the earlier we can get in and be able to support that student, the more we are preventing them from the more intensive, more labor intensive um, support needs ultimately. So we've got to establish that base rate of students who appear to need the additional support, right? What proportion of students can be detected by like a universal screener, for example? And then we can engage in our process about, based on like what is our capacity to serve these students, based on the student needs, who's also getting tier 1 supports properly, right? With fidelity. Do we have students who in fact could be ruled out, and really it's about implementing tier 1 supports for them, maybe at a classroom level or what have you, in such a way that they're getting more of that, and that actually can prevent them from being triaged into tier 2. So we're kind of always sort of weighing our capacity in that sense, and how many students and who and to what degree are they being ruled into tier 2. Triaging, so detecting is just the identification process ultimately, and then triaging is prioritization. If you think about triage in an ER, right, it's about whose injury is the worst ultimately in terms of getting them into, out of the waiting room and into a bed, right? So triaging, it's kind of similar in the sense that we are having to go through, okay, who's our list of students? How will we prioritize? What are our clear decision rules around prioritization, so that we can get students what they need? And like I said, really the first question, and this is why we cannot talk about tier 2 without talking about tier 1 and tier 3. Okay, so the first question in this triaging process that we always want to be asking ourselves is the student's need symptomatic of not receiving sufficient tier one support? Right? So hopefully that hits home with folks. Is this a student who looks like they need tier two because tier one is not being done to a high enough degree of fidelity, right? They're not getting what they need at tier one. And if that's happening, a whole lot of students are going to look like they need tier two. The same can be said for tier three, right? Not only tier one needs being met, but then also tier two needs being met as well. So thinking about who can we rule out once we've done our screening, who can we rule out really about improving and beefing up our tier one? And there will be a proportion of students for whom that is likely to be true. And then we kind of reevaluate and we look at, okay, now who can we rule in based on they're getting sufficient tier one supports, and in fact, we need to consider targeting them with tier two. Okay, so here's really what we want to get good at. It's that proactive detection, which may be looking at your existing data. You don't have to use a new system or a new tool, although I will show you the tools that we have available. But you can. So you can onboard other tools, or if you're like, we didn't really have, like Jenny was mentioning, like, we didn't have tier two really, like when we started. So part of getting going with tier two is actually just onboarding a tool, like onboarding a measure. You're going in the right direction because you're at that proactive detection kind of phase. And there's different ways to consider doing that, different sources of information. So what type of information do you use ultimately to detect? Yes, Sandra, there is. We're going to do a little bit of searching, in fact, for that. So we'll show you what's available. And then based on the data you have, how can we triage? Who can we maintain at tier one if we beef up tier one? Who actually needs tier two? And then also some students are going to also go straight from tier one to tier three in some cases, but we want to be really careful about making sure that we are accurate in that need because of course tier three is much more intensive as well. So there's this rule in, rule out process along the way. And having those clear decision rules for all of those components, this starts to build our capacity and our structure for the fluidity between the tiers, right, that we were talking about. So you all may have a lot of data. I see this a lot with schools that I work with. Sometimes, in fact, it's a beautiful thing, but it's a double-edged sword. Most schools I've worked with over the years do not have a data problem in the sense that they like don't have data, don't use data or look at data or collect data. It's that sometimes they have too much of it, like they're not quite sure what to do with it, or it's data that isn't necessarily informative or helpful for a particular decision. Or there's just not clarity around like, well, what are sort of the cutoffs? Like, how do we, make sense of this data ultimately? And again, finding your data person or people for your team can really help with this because they can help to bring that clarity when looking at data, something that feels good to them. But we want to help, gather that proactive student data. If we've got that universal screening, that can be really helpful, or some kind of like structured nomination process. And we're setting up what our decision rules are. So if you have data, but you're not so sure about your decision rules, that would be a great thing to take back to your team. Okay. All right. We are going to take a quick break, just a stretch break. And then when we come back, we're actually going to look at what some of the screening data can look like that's available through Character Strong. And I'll show you where to find it too, in case that's a tool or tools that you're interested in onboarding before we move on. So let's come back at 12 after the hour. It's about 5 minutes, just kind of a quick stretch break, grab some caffeine or use the bathroom, whatever you need to do. We'll see you back here in just a little bit. All right, folks, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. All right, we are going to get started back up. We'll take another stretch break in about an hour as well, just to kind of give everybody a break from the screen for a little bit here. All right, so as folks are kind of filtering back in, let's do a quick would you rather. In the chat, you can add, would you rather climb up a mountain or swim in a cave? Oh yeah, you could annotate too. Also, where are folks at? Climb a mountain or swim in a cave? Oh, I'd say climb a mountain's getting some more love right now. Although, not a small number of people are interested in swimming in a cave. Okay, got some adventurers out there. All right, nice. Bianca, swim in a cave. Wonder if it matters if that cave would be like in warm tropical waters, for example, versus somewhere, chillier with a wetsuit, that kind of thing. So, okay, I think we've got some more on climb up a mountain, but I am actually surprised by the number of people that are interested in swimming in a cave more so. Interesting. Water, got a good amount of water people here. So that's great. Yeah, in a tropical environment. Yeah, I'm thinking like Mexico, like somewhere that's like nice and the water's really clear and beautiful, like that kind of situation. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Fun. All right. So this is an example of one of the connection activities that we have built into our Tier 2 group for secondary students, for middle and high school students. So we just like to showcase these during our training so you can get kind of a flavor for what that's like. Okay. And okay, as promised. Oh, I forgot to clear it. Hold up. Give me a second here. Thanks everyone for your participation there. Okay. So let's take a look at and talk about then some tools around that detection process. So like I said, your schools, if you have data, if you have existing measures, oops, that you like, that's helpful to you, you can continue on with those. And you do not have to de-implement one to implement another per se, or you could add it in or you could onboard it. So just, depending on what folks want to do, we just provide these as tools, but they are not requirements to be able to utilize Character Strong Tier 2 supports. So one of the tools that we have is called the Strengths and Needs Screener. Um, at the end of the day, it is mostly just a fancy spreadsheet. It's got some macros kind of worked into it. This is one of them. Yes, Tina, this is one of the screeners. I'll show you all that in just a sec. So this is one of them. We have a few different screeners, and part of it is just dependent upon like what kind of screener and what way do you want to identify students. The strengths and needs screener can be used as a universal screener. It could be used as just certain classrooms. So you can kind of target it a little bit more. It's really up to you. What I really like about this screener is that it is not only identifying needs, and I think you all can see my cursor, but being able to identify needs in terms of externalizing behaviors, which is the column I on that kind of front image. And it uses like a green, yellow, red system so that it's pretty visually easy to identify like who's kind of high up on a particular area. So it helps to screen for students that are struggling with externalizing needs and behaviors. Students are struggling with more internalizing needs and behaviors, things like anxiety or depression related. Not to say they have to like meet the diagnostic criteria, it's just who is struggling with withdrawal or irritability, that kind of thing. or those internalizing experiences, highlights those. And then also it highlights a strengths category. So we can really, again, have as much information at our disposal as possible to be able to make those decisions about who are we identifying for tier two. And you can divide this up based on classroom. So like you could have a teacher rate everybody in their classroom, for example, and you can have different tabs set up for different teachers. So there's a lot of different like ways that you can kind of tailor this um, for your needs, just depending on what you want. Another one is the Youth Strengths and Needs Screener. This is a self-report. So this is for the student to be able to report on their own internalizing needs and strengths in particular. Students tend to struggle of any age. Students tend to struggle to identify their own externalizing needs. That's often better identified through the adults. But for internalizing, often students are the best reporters. And so this is for third grade and up in terms of reading level. But again, there's it's a way of helping to detect who might be in need of um, tier two level supports. And then another tool that we have is the structured nomination form. So it's structured, which helps us to kind of get away from just like the teacher stopping you in the hall and saying like, hey, I think so and so needs a little bit of extra, or get this kid out of my class, however they may approach you. It helps kind of get away from more of that subjective referral, because it does provide fairly, operationalized, kind of clearly defined examples and non-examples of what we're talking about when we say externalizing needs and internalizing needs. So the educators can then nominate students who in fact meet those definitions. So that's the nomination form. So there's different ways to go about, considering what you want to do, what makes sense for your school. And in fact, you may have one or more of these that you use already. You can, again, continue with those if you'd like, but they are available to you. So I'm just going to go back in just to show you all where these are located. So under our tier two carrot here in the Training in Resources Hub, in the resource library, you'll be able to find them in here. Just going to pull up screen. Is that going to be the best way? Kind of. Let me do strengths actually. There we go. So I just did a find Control F to find them in here. You can certainly like scroll through, and you can even at the top, you might have noticed there's different ways to use the menu to find different things, but I don't know. I like Control F. It's the fastest way, in my opinion, to be able to find some of this. So there's even instructions as well in the administering, the needs and strengths and needs screener. So there's some instructions in here for you. And why did it not pull that up? Hold up. Sorry for the scrolling, everybody. Let me see. Getting started. Here's our decision tree. Why is it not pulling this up? Hold on. Just making sure that you found it under detect and triage. That is true. I may need to, so we have, again, just gone live. That's a little strange that it's not in here. Okay, so I'm going to let our tech team know we need to add it in here. We have just gone live. Oh, sorry. This is also a training deck as well. So you can use this slide deck it's helpful if you're asking anybody to fill out that strengths and needs screener. It can be helpful to go through the slide deck with them to kind of train them on the particular tool as well. That is included. There we go. Okay, it's in here. I don't know why I wasn't pulling it up. You can find it under the detect and triage step as well. Thank you, Sandra. It's also under there too, but we have anything that's in any of the other tabs, depending on what you prefer, like where you want to find stuff. Any resource that's under the other tabs will also be in this resource library. It's like literally supposed to be everything. It's kind of in one place if you want to find it here. yes, we have considered adding a search bar, Brenna. Hopefully, I'm saying your name correctly. We have it in certain areas. There are, without getting into the details because I don't even fully understand them, there are sometimes some technical challenges that a search bar will bring that makes it difficult to implement one. So we do have them in certain parts of the platform and not others. However, I will add though that with our tier two, this section of our platform being so new, this is likely on the docket, besides being able to select it by like kind of group, but just a straight up search bar. So I think we'll probably get there, but it on the back end, I've learned it is not as simple as what it sounds because I have asked the same question. But here we do have the strengths and needs screener, depending on if you're in a Google system, if you can use Google, or you can use, if you need to use a Microsoft system, we've got both of them in there and you can pull that up. If you do, I'm just going to show you real quick. For Google, it will do, it forces a copy. So that way it's yours. It's, for you to be able to use and uh, reuse as needed. And then it's got information on the instructions, including like how do you want to set up the tool. It has the template, which you can copy. I prefer to make different tabs for different teachers. I think that's probably the most common way that folks use this, but it depends on what you want to do. But I've tended to copy over the template to make multiple tabs, and then each tab is for like a different teacher. One thing to know is if you do share this, teachers can see each other's data. Unfortunately, there's not a way to really avoid that other than to share different copies. And then somebody would have to enter it um, into the single spreadsheet. Unfortunately, so far we haven't found a workaround. However, I will say this obviously doesn't have any data in it versus the slide that I showed you. But once you enter the data, it will populate with this kind of light up function. But one thing I can let you all know, it's not happening yet or immediately, but it is for sure on our roadmap, is to embed our screeners as well into the new tier two platform. So just know that that is on the horizon. But for now, it'll just be a matter of getting started with whichever version of these screeners or nomination form, or continue to utilize, whatever it is that you're using within your school in order to get that detection data utilized. The other thing then I would add, just to kind of add to the detect and triage kind of step one, is that you set up, if you don't already have it, to set up a time frame for collecting and then recollecting, like rescreening, um, and looking and ultimately just looking at the data to make decisions. So, this is an example where we might be doing like monthly proactive data review all the time, looking at office discipline referrals, attendance, grades, whatever else we might be looking at. And then periodically, maybe twice a year, we do universal screening. So maybe we do that strengths and needs screener, for example. And then we also include, particularly once teachers are getting to know their students more and students' needs might start emerging over time. Let's say we miss, for a particular student, they don't screen positively in terms of needing support in our early universal screening, but a couple months later they might, or something happens for certain students, right, where they need a little bit more support. We might add in those structured nomination time points in order to continue to identify students as they sort of pop up in terms of need. Um, and I'm just looking at your question, Christy. Oh, so the template tab is where the data gets entered. The screening data tab is where it gets aggregated. So you can actually have it like run the where it compiles the data. And so then it will look like, oops, sorry. So then it will look like this. So once information is added onto that template tab, or you can make multiple copies of the template tab and you can rename them and everything else. Like usually I would name them by the teacher name, have the tabs named that way. Yes, exactly. And then you can uh, run the aggregation, like where it compiles the data, so that it would look like this, so that that information gets like added up, basically, into the data part, screening data portion. Yeah, great question. Okay. All right. Oh, let me annotate, clear this. There we go. Okay. So keep moving along here. So we mentioned decision rules, using your screener data or whatever it is that you might be utilizing to detect those student needs, just making sure that you've got some clearly defined decision rules that help students kind of move in between the tiers, and that you're tying that to those measures and metrics that you have. And then considering and reconsidering where you're at with respect to your capacity. And when we talk about capacity rate, I mentioned this already, it's really that comparison of what is our base rate, like how many of all students, what percentage of all students look like they need intervention. So that would be like students on our strengths and needs that are popping up as yellows and reds, for example. And then comparing that with, but what is our actual capacity to serve students? So if we've determined that 12% of students could be served at tier 2, 22% look like they need intervention, we've got a discrepancy there. So we need to, and that will often be true, that your base rate is larger than your capacity. So by an example, then our triage process would include really who can be ruled out of tier 2 because we're going to work on improving tier 1, and then getting that percentage of students that are ruled into tier 2 to better fit with what our capacity rate is for the adults that can serve them. Okay, so again, that's kind of a ongoing, we got to return to this process every so often, and that monthly plan, proactively looking at data and or the screening time points are good times to reevaluate that. Okay. Um, Corbin, there's a button on there that you'll have to push. I can at our next break, I will actually get into that. I can show you that. All right, there's a button basically that you have to hit to be able to tabulate everything. It'll calculate the information into it. Yeah. All right. Okay, we've kind of already touched base on this. Okay. So when you do identify then those students that you want to get into tier 2 supports, then we are back into the platform where we can start adding in students. Um, so we've kind of already done this a little bit, but I would like folks to take a moment too, just to explore looking at the nomination forms as well. And at least at that the Strengths and Needs Screener Administration and Training deck. So I'm just going to give us literally like a few minutes, maybe not even 5 minutes, like 3 minutes, just to get into the platform yourself and click around and think about, okay, are you going to utilize any of these measures? Does it make sense to bring any of these back to your teams? And in fact, I'd recommend you look at the training deck in particular, that slide deck that's available to you, and just give some thought to that. And you can drop your reflections on that or any comments you have into the chat while you're doing that. Okay. And I will go show the timeline slide again. This isn't like the end all be all, but it is an idea for timeline. Okay. And yes, there are, Brenna, and in fact, we have a new document since everything is new with tier 2. We have a document that we are editing right now as we speak that we're going to be sharing with customers as well, that speaks to data privacy, because this also impacts tier 3 also. We've had this, but we want to make it a little bit more usable for customers, so I can share that with you. All right, so give everybody just a couple minutes to get back in there into that training and resources hub. You can go into the detect and triage if you'd like. You could go in there. I am going to also clear our annotations here. Okay, and then there's some different, here's the training deck that I mentioned. I'll just go ahead and open that. Okay, just making sure I've got the chat covered. I've got a whole slide deck in here for you. You can train folks on. Kind of goes through what the different categories are about as well. Some administration timeline. You can edit this based on your own, what you prefer to do at your school. And then it goes to the youth screener as well. So Kayla, it says you don't have access to a file. Oh, it's being worked on right now. Okay, well, that's okay. Just if that's being worked on, you will have access. The main gist is just that you'll know kind of where to find these things as you come in here, as you're in the coming into the platform. That way, like you just know where to find them once you've got that access. But don't worry about it for today. That's okay. And again, this training is recorded, so we can always come back here as well. Okay. There's also one thing I didn't mention also is the family nomination form. Oh, excellent. Okay. Yeah, okay, got it. So no worries, Kayla. That's okay. It's just kind of getting folks familiar. Yeah. There's also a family nomination form as well. So if folks are interested in asking families, again, it's structured to nominate, their student if they feel like their student needs some extra support. That could be another way of going about identifying students. Okay. And then just want to point out this also the administering that there are kind of different ways that you can consider administering and some instructions for you there as well. Okay. Yes, there is a teacher nomination form as well. That is the structured student nomination. That is for the educator. I'm curious, what are just in the chat, generally speaking, where are folks kind of leaning? Do you prefer more the nomination form strategy or the screeners? Are you thinking about utilizing character strong screeners or keeping with your own or some combo? Where are folks at just looking at this right now? Considering the screener. Great. Okay. Are there folks that have done a student? You do use the screeners, yeah. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, Brenna. So you'd like to do or consider to do the strengths and needs, but it felt like too much. So going with the student structure nomination felt more folks were more open to that. Yeah, totally fine. A combo. Great.
Can I say something about the strengths and needs, just so
Yeah,
everyone like who hasn't used it can
yeah, go
know
ahead.
how it works? So we used it for kids, the strength and needs screeners. We actually used it for students who like for when they got into our social skills group because that's how we made our small groups. So we used it after our nominations. So we
Mm-hmm.
did a combination of them and it was really nice because we did it. My BI teacher, he's the cool data dude. He actually did a drop down when kids go into it, they click who their flex or homeroom teacher is. And then
Great.
it's able to do that. Um,
Cool. Yeah, and that's a good
so
point. That's a nice way to reduce it no longer becomes a universal screener strictly, so it reduces the number of students that are being screened. However, that's a nice way of using them both together where the nomination form, which might be feel less overwhelming, like we said, like there's less information that's needing to be kind of put into it and thought through, and teachers aren't necessarily identifying, or providing information on their whole classroom. But you've got a smaller group of students, and then we're screening within the group of students to figure out, okay, who's getting what, to try to target what that root cause, might be for their need. That's another way to going about doing it that can feel less overwhelming too. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Yeah, and Danielle, you use a different system. Lots of folks do, again, de-implementing a whole system is a whole other thing too. And so, again, we provide these resources, you can use them. They're not required. But we want to make sure folks have something to go on, so that you can if you need it. Um, yeah, and Caitlin, you don't have a choice, your district, and that's okay too. It's all right. You still get lots of things out of our character strong system. Okay, so gonna keep moving us along here. So that is the detect and triage process, and then we have what is step two, which is our define, our analyze, and our select. So what we're talking about with define, analyze, and select, we mean selecting, what the one is defining that root cause piece, which our data helps us to understand that, and then selecting a precise, effective intervention that's tailored to that hypothesized root cause. So as Jenny was mentioning, they use a structured nomination form to kind of whittle down their students that they're looking at to begin with. And then they're using their strengths and needs screener to then get more to the root cause analysis of that smaller group of students. And that helps us to explain like why that student's social, emotional, behavioral need exists ultimately. And then which is speaking to the root cause. So that's the analyze step. And then for the selection, it's figuring out, okay, well, where are we going to start in terms of an intervention that is really identified with that root cause ultimately. So we're going to go through this process to meet the needs of students so that we see progress, right? So first defining, why does the need exist to begin with? Um, Really linking it to that hypothesized root cause is pretty critical so that we know we're on target. We're not kind of trying to address something that actually isn't relevant for that student, or we're not going to see much change in progress. And then ultimately that brings us to another decision point. And this is, again, within the platform, you're going to be asked these questions. So it's built in at this point into the platform. Are we going to identify more of a performance need, or are we going to identify what we call an acquisition need? Okay. So, oh, let me not go ahead yet. So the difference here, and we'll talk about this more in just a minute, but what we're really talking about is do we have students who for the most part, have skills that they can utilize, but they're not being sufficiently motivated within their environment to use those skills. So that really is what we talk about when we're talking about the performance need. They're not performing their use of skills when it's needed. And we need to pair them with, a motivator or a intervention that is going to help them to utilize the skills that they have. Or are we talking about students who live more in the acquisition need area, meaning they need to acquire, they need to get some skills to be able to address their social emotional behavioral needs. So those students are maybe struggling to know even what to do. So they don't necessarily have the skills yet, and we need to work with them to build those. So we'll get more into that in a minute. But depending on, what really regardless of which intervention series we're talking about, more the performance supports or the acquisition supports, we also want to be clear about what are the behaviors that we are trying to reduce or decrease, what are the behaviors that we're trying to increase, ultimately what's going to improve aspects of their daily functioning. And how are we going to measure those as well? And again, this is also built in to the platform as well, because this sets the basis for our progress monitoring ultimately, right? So we want to define these immediately early on so that we have a sense of what are we even looking for. And we have the behaviors to decrease, the behaviors to increase as progress monitoring dimensions. Those are also built into the platform and paired with a particular intervention. So, for example, if we go the acquisition skill route, the small group supports, and we specifically are thinking this is a student who is struggling with anxiety, let's say, so they're more on the internalizing side. There are certain behaviors to decrease and behaviors to increase that are going to be already provided for you within the platform to progress monitor for that student that are tied to anxiety, the internalizing struggle that they're having. It's going to be tied to that particular need. Um, Now, eventually, within the platform, our intention is also to be able to add a completely customizable set of behaviors to increase and behaviors to decrease. For now, we've got them paired, and there's more than one, but we've got them paired with depending on the type of support that you identified. So again, it goes back to underscoring why that root cause is super important to get that identified, so that we're not off target as we're measuring, certain behaviors. We want to make sure that we're measuring the right thing, right? Um, so it- for this is kind of what I was just saying, but just in a little bit more detail. So behaviors to decrease are about things that get in the way of their daily functioning, whether it's related to themselves, others, the environment, or things to increase, behaviors to increase where they're not occurring enough within their daily functioning. We really want to see these expand. And then narrowing that down to a dimension of the behavior. So, how often is it happening? That would be a frequency dimension. Or how long is it happening? That would be the duration. Or the intensity with which it's happening, like the strength with which it's happening. You do not need to measure all of these. Rather, pick one and be able to choose the one that actually is measurable. So for some educators, for example, who are often, going to be the ones giving you this information, um, frequency sometimes is really easy to measure because it's observable. They can see it. They can just kind of mark down how often something happens. In other cases, depending on the frequency of the behavior, especially if it's the one we want to see decrease, if it's happening a lot, sometimes frequency is overwhelming because you've got, multiple students in a class, educators are tracking lots of different, BIPs and tier two metrics and all these things. Sometimes, depending on the dimension, it's just too much. It's totally okay to go with the dimension that is actually going to be able to be collected. You can always like change that up later on or add in later on, but start with whatever is the easiest to collect that data as accurately as possible. Here are some examples, and again, we have these built into the platform for you, just depending on what the need is, what the root cause of that student's struggles are. So just some examples. Those were behaviors to decrease. These are examples of behaviors or skills to increase. If we're thinking about an attendance uh, intervention, then something we would want to see increase is that we would just track attendance, right? We would look at attendance over time, and that's like super simple as far as what it is that we're identifying. If we're looking at a student that's struggling with emotion regulation, could be that that student struggles with following directions, or it could be that that student is like blowing out of the classroom and we're really working on emotion regulation. Like there's a lot of different behaviors that we could be looking at just depending on the need. And again, we need to define what the dimension is. It's totally okay to go with whichever one is actually going to be collected by the folks that we're relying on to gather this data. Okay. Um, Going back to that sort of choice between are we talking about more of a performance support or a acquisition support? We describe this as the this or that analysis. Again, this ties into the root cause, it ties into the data that we're gathering, and we're really deciding on, is it this or that, right? So we define what that student's need is, we analyze the root cause, and then we decide, is it this acquisition need, students missing key knowledge and skills, or is it that performance need, where the environment doesn't support or motivate the student sufficiently to use their skills? And this is a decision point that you'll see within the platform where you'll be asked this. You'll just be asked to choose. And it's a matter of, all that screening data and team time that you've gathered ahead of time to be able to make those decisions. Um, again, just some helpful information to consider. If you're thinking of going one direction or another, you're trying to sort of decide. If we're looking at an acquisition need, we're generally talking about the situation where the challenge of their environment or the expectations within their environments, the demands, is greater than that student's knowledge and skills. Then if that is true, then we're probably talking about an acquisition need. If it's performance, it's that they might know what to do, but the gap between the knowing and the doing, which is where performance happens, right? They're performing a particular skill to get to the doing part. There's a gap there. And if that is the case, then we're probably talking more about a performance need ultimately. Um, I do want to point out that within the platform, we have the ability to add a student into tier 2. We also have the ability to add a support, to like start with a support based on the data that we have. This is especially helpful if your school already has pretty robust data collection and planning tools, and you've kind of already got that like embedded in your system. Then you can actually just kind of go ahead and put together, let's say you already know that you want to run a small skills group. You can set up that skills group through the add support button, and then you can start adding students into it, versus you add a student and then eventually match them to a particular support. You can go about it either way. It just depends on like what information you have available to you as you're entering into the system. Okay, but I wanted to point that out, that you can kind of come at it either way, depending on which direction. And then ultimately, the system is going to ask you to then choose which is the need that you're going to go for. So again, this is this like decision tree point of, are we going to match a student to a performance-based support, to a skill building curriculum, those are the small groups, or to attendance. And then that will take you into the intervention part of it. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth, and then we'll have another chance to kind of explore these a bit as well. So let me get back out here, Lori. So depending on your view, so I'm in my view of the platform, and I have like the district admin level access. Yours might look a little bit different. But if you go into the delivery dashboard, you'll have the ability, that's what I was showing there, the ability to add a support where you can like start to set that up. So let's say I'm going to go into skill building curriculum. I'll back out of this in just a second. I'm going to choose, let's say, 3rd through 5th. And then I'm going to choose like which group it is that I want to get set up. Or, let me just go back out. Under students, if you've gotten your students, you either need to add a student in, or maybe you already have students entered in, depending on, again, if you've had access or not to tier 2 at this point, or kind of even played around with it a little bit. You can go under students and add student. And that would be where you start to add in their an individual student's demographic information and start to get them entered into the system. And then you get to match them to that particular student. Let me go back here. A particular support, depending on which one they want. Okay. How can we edit a student's profile? Let me just see. It should, yeah, I think you can do either actually, the view here or the 3 dots to edit. Let me see if it will let me do that. View. Oh, and then I'm going to keep going 3 dots here. Let me see if it lets me go deeper. Ooh, that's a good question. I wouldn't want you to have to delete the student. I mean, you can do remove student and start over. That actually may be a question, Corbin, that I'm going to need to take back to our tech team. We are also all getting familiar with this new system. So let me make note of that, to edit a student's profile, because I'm also not seeing the ability to do that on my end. But I will get back to you about that and let you know. It's a great question. And then, so you will, in order to add a student, do you see the tab for students? It may be blank. I have a bunch of like test cases in mine, so mine's going to look a little bit different. Do you see the add student button in there? And you might be in my supports also. You could add student. That's for you, Winter.
Yeah, when I click that, it brings down a drop-down box and it doesn't have any students in it. So it won't let me, like, do I need to have a roster assigned to me or something?
No, but that is probably a permissions. So you don't see this. This window does not come up.
No.
Okay. So that is probably a permissions issue. Do you know who your school lead is?
I sure do.
Okay. Double check that they have given you tier 2 permissions
Okay.
fully to be able to add a student. If that doesn't work, let me know. I'll make sure you have my email as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay. Danielle, it's okay. You can get access after. That's okay. We're just kind of getting our feet wet a little bit here. But and the other piece I would add, Danielle, too, is that we have a bunch of office hours also that we're offering over the next couple of months. You could also drop into that too if you found that getting in there, you were like, oh, I don't remember how to do this part. You can also reach out that way too, or email as well. I'm happy to hop on a call with you too. Grace, yes, there is. That also good. No, we definitely have folks that are more centralized. That is also a permissions issue. It's incorrect that you can't access more than one school. So I'm wondering if the person who can give you permissions realizes that. We may need to follow up about that. Let me look at once we're done today, I will touch base with our tech side to see what y'all's permissions look like and make sure that you've got that correct access for more than one school. Okay, all right. And I know we've got some questions coming in. Permissions have to be given by your school lead. Christy, are you the school lead, Christy? because we have a knowledge article on how to give permissions I could share with you. Let's see. You are. Okay. All right, Christy, I will share that with you. It's called a KBA, and I will share that with you so that you've got it. And yes, Grace, I will follow up with you. Okay, just making sure I've got everybody. Yeah, it's so, Brittany, that's a great question about permissions and kind of who should have it. We don't want everybody necessarily to be able to access, so it is appropriate and, you know, relevant for student privacy and things like that to be kind of selective in who has access. But we do have some guidance on that. It's not like set in stone. It's not like you can only give access to X number of people or in these certain roles, but it does have some guidance on there that you can follow. I'm happy to share that. I'll actually just email out to the group the permissions for anybody that needs it for their school leads. Yeah. You will need to add them as they are identified for tier 2 supports. Yeah, I'll just email the group for the permissions piece. But you will need to add students who are screening into needing tier 2 supports. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm gonna keep going so we can dive in a little bit more into more of the intervention pieces. Okay, we'll get through as much of that as we can as well. Corbin, so for tier 2, you won't want to, right? So there is a distinction between students who are tier 1 versus tier 2. So wanting to have students in this delivery dashboard be those students who in fact are getting tier 2 supports, you will match them to a tier 2 intervention specifically so that they're showing up in your delivery. I'm going to go back to the support management one. So for example, I'm able to see in here, I don't have anybody entered, but if I did, we would have the number of students that were in progress, the number of students who hadn't started, number of students who had completed tier 2 specifically, because they're going to be matched to, these are our performance supports, these are attendance. Once I built a group, I would have my small groups listed here as well. And then students, the numbers are reflective of who is matched to those in tier 2. Okay. Thanks also for pointing out about not being able to, okay, so you can't edit or delete. The delete student function might not be turned on yet. It might not be live yet. It will be. So no worries, we will be able to delete students if you're just like entering students to test or to practice. We will be able to do that. After training today, I'll check in with our tech team to see what the timeline is on that, and I'll get back to folks. It might just be that it is not live yet, that feature, but it will be. The edit one, though, is a different question, so I'll ask about both of those. That is a different team from me. So I'll check on that, though. All right. Okay. So let's dive in a bit then into the interventions, because we've also had lots of updates and improvements related to our some of our interventions too. So again, with select, we're going to choose acquisition base versus performance. I will point out that the names that you see listed here for the small groups, coping, regulation, relationships, and self-management, if you're an elementary educator, then you're going to see slightly different names because we changed the names for elementary to match up what was already in the PK and K curriculum. So coping is called courage for students who are struggling with internalizing emotions for elementary. Regulation is called calm, because regulation is too big of a word for elementary students. So we called it calm. And then relationships is actually still relationships. So that's the same across all of them. And then self-management, same thing. We renamed it to responsible. So it now matches what's in PKK. So PK through fifth grade, it's going to have all the same naming. In secondary, we left it what it is because this terminology works a little bit better for secondary. But we did make some slight changes there. And then these are our performance-based interventions. These have stayed the same. So there's not going to be changes there if you've used these before. Not yet. I'm sure we'll be making improvements, but so far we've got those are going to stay the same. And then we also have the attendance supports as well. And I would say that if we think about quick wins, a lot of the times we're sort of quick to identify and start up our small groups. But at the end of the day, really some of the quickest wins, if you just want to get started with tier 2 and do that in the most, low burden, high impact kind of a way, I would suggest either, well, one, starting with the attendance interventions, because if students aren't coming to school regularly, they can't really benefit from the performance interventions or the small group interventions. So the quickest win is attendance if you've got students that are struggling with attendance. And there's quite a bit that's built into those attendance supports as well. And then performance-based, I would also say is a quickest win also, because we're really kind of organizing the environment around the student to support them using skills that they might already have or at least can use sometimes. And be able to kind of quickly get in there with some sort of lighter touch intervention that allows them to be successful day to day, or at least can maintain them for a period of time until we then maybe decide if we want to go the small group route. Okay, so really in terms of quickest win, attendance and performance are where I would consider starting. And then that gives you some time to think about, well, who's going to run small groups, what students actually are, making sense to get triaged into that, what type of group, that kind of thing as well. So we've sort of already indicated this, but within the platform, you'll be guided into this decision tree around if you're choosing the performance supports, which one, and it's just a click of a button there. This is just a reminder about, what is really the decision point here if we're looking at performance versus acquisition. Thanks, Danielle. I'm glad that that's helpful. And just to get us a little bit of an example here, based on kind of what you've seen so far, I've got a student for you to take a look at. Just to give you, there's very little information here to make this kind of a quick and easy sort of exercise. But just based on our student here, Arlo, for whom we have gone through the process of considering, okay, what are some strengths for him and where might he be struggling? So Arlo's gone through our screening process. And what we know about Arlo is that he's creative, he's athletic. We know that academically, when we look at his grades, that he's struggling in English and math. He's also a student who has been struggling with absenteeism. He's not quite there yet, but is at risk for hitting that mark of absenteeism. He's also scored in the high risk range. So thinking on our screener, the green, yellow, red light, he's in the red for externalizing and internalizing behaviors. And we know that some of the things that we've observed, that we've heard about from educators, or we've observed if we've been the one in the classroom ourselves, that he becomes verbally aggressive when he's feeling frustrated or angry, that he's got some verbal aggression episodes. So just based on what you're taking in, just add in the chat, what are things that stand out to you as like, if I were to pick up a particular intervention and match that to Arlo just off the top here, like skim the top, what stands out to you? What do you think he could benefit from potentially? So I see attendance. a safe place. Okay, so kind of more the performance, maybe giving him like a class pass or something like that, where he gets like a break into a safe place. Okay. Maybe small group around strategies to cope with anger. Yeah, check in, check out. Okay. Yeah, a few different things. Maybe some social skills direction about when to kind of speak up, when to kind of keep things more to yourself. Yeah, so social skills is more like a small group. Okay. So a few different things, right? Access to safe adults or extracurriculars. Yeah. Based on that information we have, we've got different kinds of directions that we might be able to go, right? If you were to identify for Arlo based on what you know, what is an example of a behavior that you would like to see decrease based on what we know? And what's an example of something we'd want to see increase, just by way of example? And I'll go back to his info. But in the chat, what would you like to see decrease? What's one thing you'd like to see increase? What do you think? What's measurable there? Decrease verbal, increase attendance. Yeah. Decrease chronic, I'm looking at the bullets. Decrease chronic absenteeism, decrease verbal aggression. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Use of effective strategies. Maybe things like positive movement, coping skills. Yeah. These are great. You guys are on track. You are on in the right way of thinking about decrease, increase. And then, of course, we also want to be thinking about, okay, what dimension of this? What's going to make sense in terms of an observable component? Increase leadership connection. Nice, Angela. Yeah, that's a great idea too. So what's going to make sense in terms of that dimension of measurement also? And, depending on, again, going back to his info, depending on how often, let's say, he's having those verbal aggressive episodes, we might be able to do something like frequency. But if that's happening a lot, we might have an educator that is like at their end of their rope, and maybe there's multiple students that they're tracking things for. It's possible that frequency is too tricky to measure. We might need to measure a different dimension, something like intensity maybe, or when he starts swearing on top of the getting loud, that's part of like the intensity piece, or the length of time, or something like that. There isn't necessarily a right answer here. It's just a matter of kind of thinking through early on, as soon as we start to look at some of that data from a student. Okay, what are we talking about here in terms of that root cause that we are estimating or hypothesizing? What are our behaviors to decrease? What are our behaviors to increase? And how would we measure that from a dimensional standpoint? Those are the kinds of things that we want to have popping up in our minds really early on. This is an example of, for Arlo, for this particular facilitator and this particular educator, this is where they landed. So the behaviors to decrease are those the anger and the frustration where he becomes that emotionally dysregulated, decreasing those episodes, increasing using strategies to manage emotions, and the dimension they landed on was to measure this in terms of intensity. So just an example as we kind of think through, what this can look like and how we ultimately measure it. That helps to inform then as we develop our plan where we're going to get matched up, and then ultimately into monitoring progress, etc. Christy, a session that walks us through. Yeah, so I definitely think that there's a couple different ways to be able to do that as well, in addition to this particular training. So we've got an overview video that also kind of hits the high points on the platform itself. that's part of what we're making available to customers. And then we've got these ongoing office hours as well. Because folks are at sort of different places with the platform and with familiarity with that also. And you can also reach out to, like, I'm also happy to meet with you. We've even got consultation and things like that that are also part of what is possible too. So there's a few different ways to kind of be walked through, like, step by step each of the components as well, that is just strictly within the platform too, and looking at like the data that you have and what makes sense for your school as well. So and if you want to hang out too after we're done today, we can also chat about that as well and make sure that you get your needs met there too. Yeah. Okay. So getting back into our process around developing a plan, why is creating a plan valuable? What do you all think? Throw it in the chat. What stands out to you? Why is it helpful to have a plan and not just a dream and a wish? It's more likely to happen. Yep. Helps us measure outcomes, give direction. Yep. We can actually monitor a plan. Yeah. Yep. Provides a form of direction that we can monitor ultimately. Yep. Awesome. It helps to have integrity. Yeah, that's a great one too. Like, if we have a plan that we kind of all are adhering to, that helps us keep our integrity or fidelity, to that plan. It helps us be able to identify what data we need and how we track it. Nice. Excellent. Yes, exactly. So when we talk about step 3, developing a plan, within our Character Strong Tier 2 process, it's kind of all those things that are baked into it, right? So we're getting really clear about what are the core components of our plan, our specific intervention. We're assigning responsibility as well. That's part of developing our plan, so that we can help everybody kind of stay on task and be able to move through their implementation kind of role for Tier 2. We're also doing things like selecting important dates that guide the implementation and monitoring process along the way as well, so that we can, like we're showing that sort of suggested timeline for when we're coming back together to look at data, for example. That's also baked into our plan so that we can get real specific about when are we going to, in fact, come together to make decisions about how things are going and what sort of the next decision to make, that sort of thing. So within our Tier 2 platform, again, this is more baked in than it used to be. But when you are creating a group, let's say, part of that planning process and kind of getting really clear about like who's doing what and when, that is baked in more into the platform itself. So this is showing to create a group for regulation, slash what's called CALM for elementary. This is for a secondary group, so it's for the 6 to 8 grade band. The system will ask you to provide that group a name and then identify a start date, so that you've got that like time point 0 from which all of the progress monitoring information kind of goes from there. And then also assigning facilitators for that group as well. So whoever is going to actually be delivering that information is also going to be part of that process. So this is just on the slide, Heather. So within going back to the platform here, well, you can get to it a couple different ways, but, oh, actually, sorry, let me get back here. If I do add support, I'm in the delivery dashboard. If I do add support, let's say I'm going to do skill building, and then I'm going to identify my grade band, and then I'll identify which one. I'll just do the one that showed in the slide for regulation. And then here it brings us to the group name, start date, and then assigning facilitators through there. Okay, which is a drop down. Yeah. All right. So that's part of the planning process that exists now, again, baked into the platform. Um, just curious for our group as well, thinking about how you envision this being, like, who's on your tier two team and who's sort of doing what. Who are some of the team members, maybe by like role? You can just drop it in the chat. Who would be involved in that planning piece? Like, who are some of your, who would be facilitators or who would be involved in doing your check-in, check-out system? Things like that. So, Liza, you said your SEI support staff, you've got a team of folks, it sounds like, who can be part of that. A resource officer, they're great to have. They're often a trusted adult that can be part of like a mentoring process with the skill support, that kind of thing. School process, the school counselors, yep, instructional coaches, PBIS team, yep. Nice. Teachers, yep. Not missing out on including the educators, instructional coaches, admin, yeah, me, Kayla, me, it's me. Yes. But remember, Kayla, first step is going to be recruiting your people, right? If it's just you as well. You got a mental health team. Awesome. Okay, nice. All right. So again, part of this process is just as we kind of walk you through it, it's getting a little bit of flavor of how we get started with utilizing the system, but also broadly about just implementing tier two and thinking about who is on my team, you know, who am I going to identify when I think about my drop down for like facilitators, for example, who's on that list? When you know we are actually in the midst of getting this started. School nurse, folks who are attendance specialists, yeah, this is great. So we've got a lot of different roles and possibilities there that are part of our team, which is awesome. Unless you're Kayla, and then Kayla's job is to recruit more people. Okay. So just kind of moving us along here in the process, and then we'll continue to kind of go back and forth between the platform and the slides. So in our step 4, this is where we're talking about implementing the plan itself that we came up with. So now like we're rolling, like we're doing the interventions here, right? And then monitoring the students' progress and their response to the interventions. Ideally, you know, using those tools that are available to us within our platform, and then also maybe periodically rescreening for some students just to kind of see where they're at, as well as progress monitoring fidelity, right? So we're really doing both. We're monitoring student progress. Are students, in fact, doing better? That's super important. And equally as important is monitoring fidelity. So both of those things need to happen simultaneously. And both of those are also baked into the tier 2 platform now. We really took this from tier 3. So if you've been utilizing tier 3, Character Strong's tier 3 platform, the way that we do student progress monitoring, individual student progress monitoring, as well as fidelity monitoring, that now it will look very familiar because we have brought it into tier 2 to have that just be right there and accessible. So if we're talking about acquisition supports, performance-based supports, attendance supports, no matter which one, we want to be implementing we want to be implementing the core components of each of those. Of course, they're all going to be a little bit different. We'll do some brief review of each of these, okay? So for our acquisition based interventions, who are we talking about that, you know, is going to fit best into these particular groups? Just a quick review, and what are the components, like what's really included within there? As we said, it's really students that are needing certain knowledge or skills to be able to meet the expectations of their environment ultimately. And the core components of those small groups includes the small group itself, which are group sessions that are facilitated, maybe by you, maybe by someone else. And then developing a personalized plan that's part of the small group process. There is a school mentor role that's a really important part of those small groups, so that that person who's not the facilitator is somebody who is a trusted adult. I saw, like, for example, a resource officer mentioned. There may be other folks, people who have a good relationship with students that do check in, check out, for example, that are there to facilitate the student using their skills outside of the group. That's really the gist for the mentor role. And then also, hopefully, that family support as well. And baked into the platform, baked into the resources for our small groups, includes a mentoring log, for example, that's new to our elementary curriculum, as well as things like communications that are already just, you can through the click of a button, literally copy them to email that can get sent out to educators, mentors, and family members as well, so that everybody can be part of ensuring that that student is getting support and using the skills that they're learning in the group. Andrew, to your question about the delivery dashboard, yes. So if you use the intervention planning and monitoring tool, that giant spreadsheet that struck fear and panic into the heart of many. Some people loved it, but it took a little bit. Once you got using it, it was pretty easy to use, pretty simple to use. But it was really like all these decision points and kind of all these pieces worked into this visual, spreadsheet that no longer exists because the platform itself has all that information built into it. So the delivery dashboard is part of that information, and also just like the decision points as well, so that we do not need to use that gigantic spreadsheet. Yes, good news, right? It's built in there for sure. Okay, so these are the core components for the skill groups. There's a really robust, strong research base that supports how the skill groups are structured, and including all of those components as well. Thank you, Brent. I'm so glad that you like them. Yeah, we've really tried to simplify that mentor component, because if you see on here the school mentor support skill use in school as like one of the three, right? It's equally as important. If anything, it may even be almost, I don't know if it's fair to say more important, but it's equally important, because if a student only uses their skills in group, like, what's the point? Right? We need them to be utilizing the skills outside of group. We need it to generalize to their environment. And a mentor role in helping them do that and doing those regular check-ins is so critical, so that we can see these other outcomes, the proximal outcomes, the intermediate, the distal. It's really like the short to long-term kinds of outcomes that are there if we're having fidelity to those components. So it's pretty important to have that person available there for each student. And we've really tried to simplify that, so that not only the resources to get mentors up to speed, but also that kind of communication between facilitator and mentor can be more clear as well. So I'm glad that you're liking those. That's awesome. The other thing that's, the other thing that is built into, for which, again, there's a nice, strong, robust research base to this, for the instructional model that's included within the small groups. All of our small group sessions are going to have sort of a start phase where we're kind of opening up, we're connecting, we're getting, kind of grounded in getting our focus together for what's going to happen within the small group. We go through a learn process because we've got to teach the skill, right? And then as part of that learning is also practicing within, modeling and practicing within the small group itself. And then an exit process as well that's pretty structured, so that students really know what to expect as they come in and as they go out of group, and they're set up for success. And then the extend, that's where our communications live for our mentors and for our families. Those can be accessed pretty quickly and easily, so that they can be sent out. And then we're hitting all the levels when we think about that fidelity monitoring piece. You'll be checking, did we do the extend? Did I send the communications? If I'm the facilitator, did we hit the components in the learn section? Did we do our connection, activity to get started? You'll be able to select those, and it'll give you even a score which we'll get a visual of that in a moment, that will tell you, where are you at with intervention fidelity when it comes to something like small group support. We kind of touched on this already, but that mentor support is really critical. And we use the 4Rs model as part of the mentorship model. And we've got videos for mentors to be able to watch and learn about that as well. The 4Rs is to role model and practice, remind the student of their skill, recognize and reinforce when they're utilizing that skill, and reviewing it. And it's just a way to help kind of structure their communication really with the student and be able to recognize their efforts along the way. Families also we've got videos to share with them, and communications, each week relevant to the small groups as well, to help continue the learning, help continue the support outside of the school as well. Oh, sorry, the animation's a little out of order on this one. And they are prepackaged. Like I said, there is just a copy to email button that you can utilize for families. If you do want to get started, we talked about quick wins. I mentioned attendance, I mentioned performance supports, really are probably the quickest wins ultimately. But if you're like, no, I'm going to give it a try, we're going to get started with a small group. Or maybe I'd been doing small groups and now I'm transitioning into just the new version of, the updated version of small groups, for example. It's perfectly okay to get started with just like 1 or 2 small groups and build from there. You don't need to do all 4 curricula. You can just choose like based on maybe your most emergent needs from your screening data. Just like start with 1 and get started slowly and kind of move along that, and then build into it more, maybe across different curricula, building in different types of groups, or maybe outside of a particular grade band or something like that, just depending on how you service the schools that you work with. You can get started by watching the overview video, notifying family members, and then start identifying mentors as well and share those mentor sessions. And that's really like, even for just 1 group, hitting those points early on in the school year. If it's before your school year starts, you can even start doing that now, or once you've got some screening data before you actually have that first session. Those are the steps that you can take to go ahead and like get your feet wet and just give it a shot with the small groups. Okay. All right. I do want us to get just a couple minutes of kind of going in and looking at what small groups can look like. However, I was not sure if it was going to be live. Whoops. If it was going to be live just yet. So bear with me. I think I've got it set up where we just look at the curriculum samples, but any moment now, our small group curriculum is going to go live. So let me look in here and just see if it's live. We can take a look at it. Nope. Okay. It is not yet. All right. So what we can do is look at our curriculum samples. So I'll give you the instruction here, which is at the bottom of the menu. We've got the very bottom under resources, curriculum samples, and you can choose tier 2, and then you can, in fact, our newest samples are in elementary. So this is where we've done the biggest kind of update and reworking of our curriculum. So I'm just going to go into this 3rd through 5th. There are updates at all grade bands, but we've done the biggest one at elementary, and then we'll continue to roll out updates to secondary as well. PK and K have been fairly recently updated, so we've tried to actually kind of better align with PK and K, and then we'll continue to update. But this is just an example. This would be for 3rd through 5th grade. This is a session 3, and this is in the Powered Up Relationships group, so focused on social skills. And with the new structure within elementary, we have this poster that is really kind of a central feature for the elementary curriculum, where it serves as a reminder and kind of a touch point, and literally is intended to be set up like near the door, right? So it can be both an entry reminder as well as an exit reminder as they're kind of coming in and out of group, where we're getting started with doing a quick temperature check for all the students, using a power to get ourselves regulated. If a lot of students are struggling with kind of where they're at in terms of their temp check, you can do just a quick, calming strategy. It gives us a reminder about our group agreements, which there's a process in one of the sessions, the first session actually, where you'll actually identify which group agreements the group is going to land on, and then you can just stick those there's like a cutout that you can get as part of that session, where you can even laminate them and just like Velcro, on the back, so that you can reuse the same poster and the same group agreements across multiple groups, and you can swap them out depending on the group that you're with. And those are things like being kind to one another, being respectful of one another in group, that kind of thing. That's what goes into these group agreement sections. Each group will have their sort of homework for group as a mission. In elementary, we call them missions. In secondary, we call them to-dos. And the mission check here as they're coming into group is a reminder about, did they bring their mission ticket? Again, each group will have like a cutout that has their mission already populated onto it, and it has a section for a signature from their mentor as well as a family member. And then you can work in some rewards around like the return of the mission tickets, but at least some check where you're kind of reviewing with them what was their mission from the last session. That's what this reminder is about on the poster, and then eventually the exit. But the other big piece of kind of how this has been restructured at the elementary level is that we have a single slide deck. We no longer have like the start section, the learn section, where we're like jumping back and forth between slide decks and where we're at and resources. What we have now in this updated version is a single slide deck. It's got everything baked into it. We start and end the same way for every session. We do our connection game. This is an example of the power line you saw at the start of our time together. We do like a grounding, just like, are we ready to learn, kind of a grounding, deep breathing. And then we get started into what we're going to do. This particular sample session is focused on changing our thoughts. So when we get stuck in negative thought patterns, practicing our thought power. Of course, it's called Powered Up at elementary. So it's all about identifying and learning powers and then leveling up our powers and stuff like that. And we just kind of, can walk through the lesson, and videos are embedded and that kind of thing. Scrolling back up though, for facilitators, this is another big change to tier 2. We no longer have what used to be like a slide by slide script that was like 27 pages long and really just too much for most people to be able to get through a session in a reasonable amount of time. So we have facilitator guides, which now exist at both elementary and secondary, that is a single page, maybe front and back, but a single page facilitator guide that really just serves as like reminders. It orients you to the slide, for our start components. What is our purpose? What are the materials we would need? And then it gets into each of the sections. So that here's our teach section, things that are in, let me make this a little bigger. Things that are in quotations are literally like intended to be script. You can just use that if you'd like, or kind of make it, say it your own way. It orients you to the videos when those exist on slides, and then, gives some just direction to the facilitators, and has it just broken up by the chunk of the slide sections, and also approximately how much time should be spent on each section. At elementary, we've been able to really prune a lot of our lessons so that they're much more efficient. We're looking at about a 16 to 20 minute window of time. So really trying to improve the timeliness. And then on secondary, we're also more likely to have more like a class period. We're averaging around 30 minutes to 45 minutes for some of the longer sessions, but they could also be broken up as well. And that's also true for elementary. You can always like break it up and come back to it to finish up a session as well. But we've really tried to streamline it quite a bit. So very soon, any day now. These updated sessions for our small groups will live in our intervention library, and you will have them for all of the grade bands in English and Spanish as well. And it will look a lot more streamlined than it has in the past. So right now you can still get in there and look at the PKK curriculum as well. Like you can take a look in here too. Oh, we do. We have. I just didn't scroll down. I'm so sorry. Let me just double check that we're good. Oh, yay. Okay. Do you all see this on your end? Sorry if I go back here. I was hoping this would happen during our training. If you do the drop down, do you see beyond PKK when you click on one of these? Yeah. Okay, good. We're seeing it. Here it is. All right. So it is live. So you've got this delivery resources that gives you an overview of the group. And then, oh no, it might, just kidding. This may all not be totally updated yet. Hold on here. Let me get in here. Okay, we're getting there. Some of it is going live. It, like I said, any day now, it will be fully live. But as you get in here, under the delivery resources, this will be the structure. It has an overview of the group itself, which is mostly for facilitators. And then it has some different resources for getting started as well. No, these are older. Darn it. I thought that we got lucky during our training. So just kidding. It's not there yet, but soon, any day, you'll be able to pull from it in this way, and it'll be organized by grades as well. But PKK, this is live. This is what it's going to be for kindness, calm, courage, at least in there. And then soon, interventions will be updated. I thought we were there. Okay. Oh, sorry. How do we get there? I'll go back. It'll be an intervention library, and you'll be able to access them directly through there. Yeah. Okay, so it's skill supports or performance. So to look at performance supports, I'll just actually stay in the platform just to show you all this. For the performance-based supports, same kind of deal. We've got a drop-down menu. You can choose from them in here. There's also an overview for each of these. So if I select, let's say, check in, check out, we've got an overview video for check in, check out. And then each of the performance-based supports will also have this, what's called an implementation script. If I open that up, it really is, it's guidance around implementation. It also includes a little bit about like the research behind that particular support, examples and non-examples, and then some guidance on what the delivery can look like. Also, of course, again, you can make this your own. It's not to say that you're locked into every single step or every, component that's on there. But if we're going to be doing it with Fidelity, we want to probably be hitting most of those for any one particular support. So we've got the implementation script to help you along the way. And then for check in, check out, a lot of schools have check in, check out systems. So if you already have, a document that you used, you can still use that. But if you'd like one of our example forms, you're more than welcome to use these as well. So just totally up to you. So Sandra, the way to kind of think about it is that individually, I mean, the same could be said for small groups as well, right? We've got individual students that are going into the small groups, but you can also look at your data as a group. So how many students are getting small groups or how many students are getting check in, check out. And then you can look at their individual data in terms of progress for those students as well. In just a little bit, I have a slide that I'll be able to show you all that shows you kind of what looking at group data can look like also, and individual as well. So we've got like a little bit of both essentially. Okay, but that's how you can access either of those. Oh, and I had promised also to show attendance. So same thing, if we go into attendance supports, There's quite a lot of resources in here for attendance supports as well, including this video, which is really helpful. There's overviews of each of the different kind of sections related to the attendance supports, whether we're talking about the initial connections or collaborations that are kind of what we're sort of doing about with collaborating with family, for example, the intervention component beyond the connection around attendance. So if I click on that, kind of same thing, we have communications built in, we have some guidance in a video, and then also some information, so overview about the family collaborations and information that can even be shared with families as well. So there's quite a bit in there. Feel free to kind of jump in there too and look around and, see what components of that you might like to use for those students that are struggling with attendance. And then again, if we come back out, this is a way that we can look at our overall, number of students that are involved in our skill building groups or our performance-based supports or our attendance supports and who's sort of in progress or completed as well. So it gives you kind of a snapshot there. All right. Okay, I am just looking at time. We were able to skip ahead through some of these. I will just point out a couple of things on here about the performance supports, which is that much like with skill building, really with anything, when we come back to that root cause around how we would match up a student to a particular intervention, when this is looking at performance supports, because we're talking about students that need to be sort of sufficiently motivated and supported in using their skills, depending on what is really the mechanism of change for that student. Like, is this a student who their motivation to be sort of sufficiently motivated to see those behaviors increase that we want to see increase? If their motivation is something like adult attention, that's what we think about as like the function or the mechanism of change, then that would be a student for whom check in, check out would be a good match. If we've got a student for whom their function of their behavior, their mechanism of change would be around escape, towards like a replacement behavior, for example, then we might want to be looking at something like ClassPass. So just depending on that mechanism of change, or really it ties back to the function of the behavior, that is a good way to consider which of the performance supports we're going to really tie in. Is it a student where we see this like big discrepancy between what happens at home versus what happens at school, and we need more consistency there? Then school family communication would be a good example of a performance support to match them with. So just thinking about that function of the behavior, what's going to support them to do more of the behavior that we want to see increase, then that's how we would consider which performance support do we sort of choose from. I've already shown you a bit about what that can look like. And we talked a bit about attendance. Again, they're the sort of the 3 steps that are involved in the attendance-based interventions: connect, assess, and support. This is what each of those sections are focused on. Connect is about really making those initial connections, particularly with family and with the student themselves, around the expectations related to attending school, beliefs in the student and being able to get to school and stay in school, and being able to really kind of forge that relationship so that we can get students into school and staying there. And then we can sort of move on into other kinds of interventions and supports for that student. But the relationship piece is pretty critical up front. So that's why we have some different supports around how we communicate with families and the students themselves, and like really aligning around the expectations on attendance and the reason for why that student is struggling with attendance, because that certainly can be coming from different root causes as well. Okay, kind of gotten into this. And at the end of the day, when we look across our small group supports, our performance-based supports, and our attendance supports, we are really building a menu of supports. And overall, our goal is to incrementally grow our menu, right? But sort of where do we start? And this is just kind of coming back to what I described about needing to kind of start somewhere, and starting with those quick wins is a good way to get started. If that's where you're at, if you were in that, like, I don't have a tier 2 team yet, we're just kind of getting our feet wet. Think about exploring the attendance interventions and maybe, one or two of the performance-based supports. That would be our recommendation, um, just to kind of get going, and then you can build from there. And because those small groups can take a little bit more kind of structure and space and, time and who's doing what, it can take a little bit longer to get those set up. And so if you're going to start somewhere, consider attendance or performance, and also just like one or two performance supports too. You don't have to do the whole thing, and you'll eventually be able to add to your menu there. Okay, I'm just going to show you these last couple things real quick. I've got some screenshots again on what this can look like once you've got students in the system, for monitoring progress and making some decisions about, do we kind of stay the course for a particular intervention? Do we step a student down into a lower level tier? Or do we even consider either continuing or moving a student up into a higher level tier? And what our progress monitoring dashboard will look like once we have students entered in there. So for monitoring progress, I said that's earlier on, that we really are doing two things. We're monitoring student response and we're monitoring fidelity, and both of them are baked into the platform. So you'll be able to enter that information as you go along. We know that students don't benefit from effective practices that they did not receive. So that fidelity piece is just as important as the student progress. And to be able to kind of speak to the fidelity, you will be able to enter it into the platform, and it will look like this, where for a particular group, you'll be able to identify, okay, what was the attendance for that particular group? Were there any students that missed out on group that day? Also, did I send, I think technically that this terminology will say extend. I'm not sure that the word fidelity will be there when it goes live, but it's asking you to just check off, did I send the communication after this particular group, for example, to the educator or mentor? Did I send the family communication? And it's, again, just that copy to email button is how you would do that. And you would check those off. You can hit submit, and then you're going to be, oh, sorry, I don't know why this is. Oh, I guess I was just, I thought that was not supposed to be so zeroed in. Sorry about that. Just for each of the components of whatever intervention it is that you're doing, you'll be able to review your intervention fidelity data per week as well. So if you've got a student absent, for example, this is an example of one of the performance supports. This is a student absent, so there wouldn't be a date that was entered in, but it's going to show you, were they absent that day? You'll be able to input per intervention, like depending on which one you're doing. If it's a small group, it's going to ask you about, did you complete the components of the group and the extend communication that we're showing? If it's a performance-based support, it's going to ask you about whichever component of fidelity is relevant for that particular support as well. And then you'll be able to look at it all together and enter progress monitoring information as well for a particular student. So maybe you are, maybe a student has a couple of different teachers, for example, that are giving you frequency data on behavior. You'll be able to enter that for a particular student, as well as to look at a group along the way to look at progress monitoring information. I mentioned that the actual metrics that we want to see increase, as well as things that we want to see decrease, behaviors to increase, behaviors to decrease, those are just baked into the platform as well. So it will look like this, where you're just selecting like a 0 to 3, and it's based on whichever intervention you're doing, what are the behaviors that are tied to that intervention to increase as well as to decrease, and you'll be able to just click on those. And then ultimately we'll get a student dashboard that has data entered into it to be able to see that progress over time. And I think I have a slide on that in just a moment. Because once we've got the data over time, which really the beauty of any dashboard is time, because you can start to see trends over time. Are things getting better? Are things getting worse? Are they getting better in one person's class, but not better at another person's class? We'll be able to see that over time and make decisions about, do we maintain, do we need to improve fidelity? Do we change the intervention altogether? Is it not a good fit? Or can we consider fading or exiting out of that intervention as well? That's really what our review and decision points are about. It's kind of figuring out where we're at on this quadrant, depending on, do we have sufficient or insufficient fidelity? And do we have positive or not positive response from the student? And there's also, this used to also be kind of an external tool that lived outside of the platform itself. You'll be prompted within the platform to answer these questions. So you'll actually be asked, there's a section called the Decision Center, where you'll be able to look at details for any one particular student, and you'll be able to see your fidelity information as well as review attendance information. It'll look a lot like this. You'll get a total fidelity score. And there's even recommendations within the platform about what your fidelity cutoff point is. So if it's 80% or above, for example, that suggestion is that you're doing pretty good with fidelity. If it's below 80%, this is at 67%. We're not quite there yet. So we may want to really focus on the fidelity of the intervention delivery before we decide to take this student out of that particular intervention. So that information will be included in there. And then this is what I was thinking of, where you, over time, you'll be able to actually see the graph of, in this case, this is looking at the behaviors to increase, and it's looking across multiple informants. And we can see, depending on who we're looking at, for Miranda's class, for example, or Miranda as my informant, depending on wherever Miranda's meeting with the student is still struggling, in fact, quite a bit within that person's environment, versus like Young over here, they're above our aim line, which is this dotted line. It's kind of like a goal line. In this case, student Clay is actually doing pretty good with them. So that gives us some information about where we might want to increase either our intervention or fidelity, or have a conversation, perhaps amongst the team members, to see how we can increase this improvement overall and across different informants and their environments as well for a particular student. Okay. And again, it will ask you these questions just baked into the platform. Did the student receive the core components? In this case, this was for a coping group with at least 80% fidelity. Did the student respond positively by making expected progress towards the goal? Depending on how you answer those, it will make a suggestion to you, which you don't have to take, but it's a suggestion, and describe some ideas of how, in this case, we're saying, okay, we might want to increase that fidelity or try to improve it. Here's some different ways that we could do that in order to improve the fidelity. Okay. All right, just want to check back in with folks. This is really just a reminder about kind of going back to the beginning of that knowledge check resource. It's a place to start. It's a place to refresh, even if you've done tier 2 before, or even if you've done tier 2 with Character Strong, using that tool as a consideration to kind of just reassess at baseline, sort of where your teams are at the start of this new school year. We also have, just as a reminder, we have a lot of professional development support, particularly as we're starting up this school year because of the new platform and the kind of ins and outs, logistics and technical components of it. We have quite a lot of office hours that we're offering over the next couple of months. We've got this recording that will be posted. And then also just within the platform, as we pointed out, depending on, kind of where you're at in your tier 2 process, there's a lot of videos and resources as well that we will continue to add to that too, to support everybody as you're going along and getting started. All right, let's do one more quick annotation before we wrap up and take some more questions just to see kind of where you're at. Where will the video be posted? I believe, and we might even have one in there. Let me double check. Yep. So sorry, I'll go back to the slide in just a second. Under live and recorded trainings in that training and resources hub, right in here is where this is where you can sign up. And then under here, recorded trainings, I mentioned that platform overview video. It's relatively brief. That's also living in here right now where you can watch that recording too, which is just, again, to kind of get you started. Strictly platform. So it pretty much just walks you through the platform without additional content coverage on like getting started with tier 2 and diving in a little bit deeper into tier 2. So that's also in there. So sorry about that. It switched over from the annotations. So just seeing where folks are at, if we move the needle a little bit on how you're feeling about getting started with tier 2 in this school year. Right. And I recognize that even if you've been with Character Strong before, there's still a lot that's new. So we'll all be on kind of a level playing field in that way. Oh, I like the little heart. Thank you for trying that. That's cute. Okay. Looks like for those folks that are still with us today, we've moved away from this face for the most part. So that's good. We've moved the needle. We've got some folks that are still like, yep, got to get my feet wet, make sure I have all my permissions so I can get in there. I'll be sure to be in touch with folks about that as well. I know not everybody had that totally set up yet or discovered that it wasn't set up once you got in there today. Okay, awesome. Okay, I do want to just quickly put up here our QR code. This is just to get our feedback on today's training. We use our data. We love our data. Probably no surprise to you all. I would love it if you took just a few moments to fill out that survey, that evaluation. That would be wonderful. Thank you for doing that. You might have to click off of annotation to if you're trying to copy the URL. Thank you all so much. I will hang out for a few more minutes as well if folks have questions. That's awesome, Sandra. That's great news. Feel free to check back in with our live schedule for office hours and PD. We are here to support you all. Thanks, everyone. And I'll stay on to answer questions too. If you've got a question, feel free to unmute. Brenna, so we have a document for customers that we are working on updating right now. I imagine even within the next few days, we'll be able to share that. It probably will go into the resource library, but I also can just send it out to the group of folks that joined this training. So you can get it that way directly. Yeah,
I just have a logistics question.
Yeah.
It was really hard to attend office hours and trainings during the school year.
Okay.
Because of them being like literally like during the teaching day, like not even close to lunch. And so it's like it's really difficult. Are they trying to do like office hours spread out and not just at the same time every time? Because it's really hard to get coverage.
Yeah.
To be able to attend those when we really did need it last year as first year working through. So I just didn't know if that was something they were looking at.
Yeah, that is a great question, Jenny. And yes, and here's a couple ways that we're trying to address it. So one issue is it's hard because we have people in multiple time zones.
Right.
So it is like it's tough to find times that will work for everyone. But what we're doing is a couple different things to try to triangulate. One is offering office hours support at just different times of day, to try to help out with folks. And people have their like prep periods and things like that at different times too. And, so trying to get a little bit more variety in there for
Awesome.
the time that they go. The other thing is that I mentioned that this month and next month we have a bunch of office hours that are being offered. They are
Perfect.
also really quick. So they're almost all of them are like 20 to 30-minute office hour windows to try to just like get questions answered, et cetera. And they're very logistics focused. So most of them are going to be not so much like talking about students, but more like, where do I find this button to click on? Like very much
Okay.
platform oriented, like just getting into the new platform and getting people going with that
Perfect.
and like making sure their access is correct and that kind of thing. However, starting next month and then beyond that for the rest of the school year, we'll offer more like normal office hours in the sense that they're about an hour long. You can, they're not strictly just focused on the platform. It's much more like just whatever you're bringing. Maybe you have a skill group question that you're like, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right, or I've got questions about this, or this one student's really difficult to get engaged. And can we talk about that? So a lot of different topic areas. Those are going to be offered at different times than what the shorter logistics ones were offered at. So we're trying to do a variety there, to get folks support at the time that they can actually attend it. And then we will also record those longer office hours. We'll be recording them and we'll also post them to the
Oh,
website too.
okay. And then
So
the only other question I had is, so when like, because I do have admin access,
yeah.
but when we go in, we put our like all of our kids in the school supports. Do I have to add them again to the my supports one for the student section? Because it's weird because it shows up in the school supports, but nothing shows up in the my supports. So that was the only other question when we were doing this today that I had.
So this will be for let me make sure I get this right. I may need to double check this, but I'm like 98% sure
Yeah, because it was
that
super weird. 'Cause I typed it into the tier two, like in the school supports. Like I clicked on
Yep.
the activity overview. I clicked on school supports and I added my sixth grade students because I could see my BI teacher already added in some of his seventh and eighth graders that are going to be using it. But then
Okay.
it's weird because nothing shows up in the my supports and it wants me to add a student again. I'm like, I don't want to duplicate students. So I wasn't quite sure how that worked.
Did you assign yourself as facilitator?
Um, let me see what I'm.
Because you
Oh
will, that is
no,
how it pulls it in. That's where I'm like 98% sure, but I can
I'm
double
listed
check
as
it. But
both.
it's
I feel like I'm listed as both
really,
because
and it,
I do I have to go between facilitator because it doesn't have that when we add in the students in the school support side. It just
oh,
has it as it just has them add in their name, first, last name, date of birth, gender, and grade. It doesn't list of like where to list this facilitator. So do I have to add them in the my support section first?
no, it should pull them in once you assign yourself as a facilitator, which is why I'm wondering.
Oh, maybe
Let me
I'm not
go back out here. Hold on.
sure. Because I was like,
You're
this
going
is
to
weird.
students, and then I'm going to add a student, and then you go, I'm actually just going to add just for like, what's, mm, just for the sake of what have you. We'll do grade. Okay. Okay. And then let me find, uh, here we go.
Okay, so the three dots.
You.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
Beauty.
then
Is that
perfect. So
helping?
yes, that's what I needed to do. That was the only part
Oh,
I did. I think I had my screen smaller, so I didn't see the three dots to the side.
Oh,
So,
got it, got it. Yeah, the three dots are like the key to unlock everything.
okay,
So,
well, that makes it
yeah.
so much easier. And then the last question that I wrote down, all the kids that we put in our school supports,
Mhm.
will we see them in like all levels? Like, will we see them in our tier 2 and our tier 3? Because like it shows like they don't have anything in the tier 3. It just says none. Whereas like some of
Right.
our intense
Do you
intervention students list an actual plan that they're going through.
do you
Um,
have so your view might look different from mine. Do you have the columns that say like students, I think it says tier 2 student needs or students who need tier 2 supports. Do you have a column that says that in here?
no, mine looks like yours. It says the
It
support
does.
management of students. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so this is going to be specific to tier 2 when you're in this delivery dashboard.
Okay.
However, back up here, I don't know that this is live yet. I'm just trying to think. I'm back up here and do you have this analytics?
Yep.
Okay. Implementation. That's schools. I'm trying to think if there is a place. No, that's not going to be it. This
It
is
was just weird because when I clicked
management.
on my tier 3 dashboard after adding students, all those students I added into tier 2, they show up on the tier 3 dashboard. They just say none, but they showed up there.
Okay. I don't think, I'll verify this with our engineering team,
Perfect.
but I think that it's going to be specific to tier 2 in this dashboard and similarly in tier 3 in this dashboard that you
Okay.
won't look at it. But that said, because tier 2 is not fully live yet with all the
Right.
new bells and whistles,
Right.
what I'll check on is to see if in the that's probably where it would live would be, or not my activity, I'm sorry, in the analytics up here, if there is
Hmm.
anywhere to see all of them all
Right. That it
together.
would all show all together.
Yeah, it would
Yeah,
be
because
in
down in that
here.
course we'll show which one we're doing. That
Right.
makes more sense.
I think they're going to be
That's what
separate.
I wonder.
Yeah, but I'll double check.
Okay. So it'll just say none in tier 3 because they're not accessing tier 3
Well, I'm actually
because they're in a
surprised
school
that they
support
show up
side.
in, I'm surprised you see them in your tier 3 at all, which is why I'm
Well, I
like,
think it's because we inserted them under school support, like in that section. So I'm wondering if it's just because they're supported in the school, they show up. But I think once
yeah.
I put them as a facilitator, maybe they'll only show up as tier 2.
Right. Yeah. Your
We'll see
guess
what
is as good as mine on that, but I will ask for some more detail on this just to get
happens.
clarity on what it will look like. Cause again, it's going to be a little bit longer. I was so hoping it would happen during our training today that everything would go live, but
I know I was
not.
too, but
But
it's okay.
it will happen very soon.
And
But
and
let
then
me get some clarity on it and I'll be in
I feel
touch.
like people ask this too. Do
Mhm.
we get emailed PD certificates for this one? Like when we do like the whole child summit and everything, can we get those emailed to us so we have verification for our schools or?
We do not.
Okay.
That's a good question, though. Let me ask about what we could do, because we have everyone's attendance,
Right.
obviously. And so,
Yeah, I saw a couple people posted, so I thought I'd ask. So,
yeah, oh, I must have missed that in the chat. Yes, I will ask
okay.
about that and find out what we can do. I'm sure there's something that
Well,
we
thank you so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate everything today. So,
Yes, thank you. I know it's a lot. It's a lot to track and as y'all are getting started, but hopefully there's some pieces that helped everybody along the way. So, and we
we need
will
to get
post it
started.
so you can go back to it.
All right, have a great day.
All right, thanks. Thanks, everyone. If anybody else has a question, feel free to unmute. Oh, I see. PDF certificate. Alrighty. Hey, bye. Thank you. Bye. See ya.
How are you? I was just shadowing today.
Oh, got it. I didn't even see you there. Awesome.
Cool.
I was hoping we were going to go live during the training, and it's like, oh man. We'll get there.
Yes.
All right. I'll see you later.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.